Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Today we have a very special episode for you, a compilation of some of the best entitled people stories we've read over the past year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few hours of the most entitled people you've ever heard of. And by the way, Karen assured me that for every thumbs up this video gets, she won't try to get anyone fired for an entire week. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen hotel guest wants a $600 upgrade for free. I was covering an overnight shift, and just as I started, I get a call asking how much one of our suites are. Our website price was around $950 before taxes and fees for this suite, which is what I relayed to this person. They said that's fine and they'll be there shortly. Two families enter the hotel a little while later, and it was the people that called. It was two couples. Both their wives had sleeping babies in their hands. Both the men had a bunch of luggage in their hands. The guys come up to me and say that they're all tired, then asked me if we could let them into the room just to put their babies and bags down real quick. Normally, I'm very strict, but I decided to be nice and let them up. Well, they took their sweet time coming down, and I eventually sent security up to tell them they have to come down and provide a card. Eventually, they came down to talk to me. Them. Hey, so the wives are going to lose it if we spend $950 before taxes. Since nobody else is going to use the room overnight, can I just book a regular room and you just upgrade us to this room? Me. No, sir. I told you over the phone how much the price would be. A standard room is $350 before taxes, and we are sold out on them tonight. Either way, I can't give you a $600 upgrade for free. Him. How about I just book a cheaper suite and you just upgrade us to this one? Me. Unfortunately not. If you want this room, it'll be $950 before taxes. Him. Then we can't stay in that room. Do you have two regular rooms we can stay in instead? Me. Frustrated that they already dirtied the room. We are sold out of regular rooms and only have suites. If you want two rooms, the price is going to be $550 before taxes for each room. Them. So it ends up being even more. Okay then, we'll just stay in this room, but the wives are going to lose it. Please, what can you do? Nobody is going to use the room. Just upgrade us. Me, still trying to be nice. If you could get an upgrade just because you came late, then everybody would come late, sir. That isn't exactly how it works. But I'll just lower it down to $850 before taxes, and that's the most that I can do. All right, thank you. Let us just go upstairs and get our cards. 20 minutes later. We spoke to the wives. $850 before taxes is still not good enough. They're gonna lose it. Can you make it $800 total, including taxes? Me. No, I can't do that. It'll be $850 before taxes. Trust me, your GM would rather that you just give it to me for $800 total instead of having us leave. Nobody is going to use the room. You'd get in trouble for losing revenue. I give him a call to double check on whether I can give them that deal or not. After the call, me. Okay, I spoke with the GM and he approved the $800 total. Oh wow, this is disgusting. Our wives just sent us pictures from the room. The carpet has toenail clippings on it, and he named some other dirty things in the room that were definitely placed by them. This is absolutely nasty. Our wives are shocked. You need to give us more of a discount. Call your GM back right now and tell him about this. Me. We already gave you a huge discount on the room. There's nothing else we can do. What do you normally do when guests find things like this in their room? You don't do anything for them? Me. Guests normally don't find those kinds of things in their room. But if they did, we'd clean it up for them, then give them a discount or offer to move rooms. Then why can't you do that for us? We already gave you a discount. Call your GM back and let him know what we found. The GM will usually be fine with a discount, but as soon as someone tries to take advantage, he gets angry. I speak with him, then speak with the guests. Me. So, I spoke with the GM, and he's taken back his offer of $800 total. So, if you'd like the room, it'll be $850 before taxes. What? I don't understand why you'd do that. The room is dirty. We should be getting more of a discount. If you want to stay, it's $850 before taxes. Those are his words, not mine. Well, we don't want to stay in a dirty room. Can you ask him if he can give us a discount on the two rooms? Me. Over the phone, he told me no more discounts on anything. If you want the two rooms, they're each $550 before tax. If you want this room, it's $850 before tax. This is highly unusual. Nothing against you, but what kind of GM takes back an offer for a discount? I've never been at a hotel that operated like this. You'd rather lose money than just upgrade us to the room? I don't know, sir. You wanted me to talk to the GM, I did, and I was told not to give you any discounts. A little more complaining by them, then they split the charges. Then I finally checked them in and they went to their room. I placed a warning for the morning shift to watch out for these guests and to not do anything for them if they try to get a discount or a late checkout. They ended up checking out without causing any problems. Speaking of hotels, what was the coolest hotel you've ever stayed at? Please let us know. Disney Hotel all day, bruh. Fire my boss? Hide millions from your client? I don't think so. This happened a while ago, but it's still so fresh in my mind. I left college with a business degree in one hand and no job in the other. And like so many colleges, the promises of alumni willing to give jobs to graduates could not have been further from the truth. So I had to seek out my start from the bottom. I found a good job in operations at a company. I can't say who without giving it away. Had a great boss who taught me pretty much everything I needed to know. Work was great and the money was good. I need to explain how the business worked so you can understand how the plan worked. The corporate office was in California and we were not. There are a lot of things that went on at this company and I can't get into all of them because it would just take away from the story. But let's just say they had a very Stratton Oakman vibe when it came to sales. I started out working in operations with some of the smaller clients, but with some help from my boss, was able to climb the ladder rather quickly to the point of being over all the operations and order processing for the firm. We had a very large client, 90% of the company's business. The way it worked was, we had two sets of sales reps, TSRs and CSRs. TSRs were the heavy hitters who reached out to the other big businesses and tech firms to extend their warranties on a product. They made real good money. The CSRs were more of the mom and pop crowd and the inbound sales calls for those that wanted to extend their warranties. The reps were all given codes that associates their clients' files with theirs, so if someone did a renewal automatically, they would get paid as it was their client. Pretty sweet gig. The client hired the firm to be the middleman for their B2B as they handled all of their everyday clients. For every $100 that came into our firm, 18%, or $18, would be for the company and the rest would be sent to the clients with the warranties activated. Most of the clients paid by credit card or PO with a wire transfer, but there would also be a good amount of checks each week and would need to be processed. A little while after I started, the client check portion was now going to be overseen by one of the sales managers. Didn't really faze me because I was working on the smaller accounts. Since we were a publicly traded company, all the sales reps' orders had to go to operations to be fulfilled. They weren't allowed to process them on their own. This is when things started going downhill. My boss at the time was given temporary access to the financials as they were hiring a new CFO and he had a background with it. We went to lunch like we had done plenty of times before, but he seemed different. When I asked him if something was wrong, he told me that something looked off with our biggest client for one of the accounts. He wanted to make sure before he said anything to the higher-ups. While this was going on, I had been offered the chance to be our new compliance officer, which means I would need to make sure everything was on the up and up. Soon after, I come in to find out that my boss was just terminated for a multitude of reasons, all of which had to be untrue, because he was a pretty well-liked guy with not just the company, but with our clients as well. As I log into my terminal, I see that before he left, he had given me admin access to his files. Here's where things started to pop off. Remember those checks that clients were sending in to renew their warranties? Well, we were cashing them all right. Apparently, we just weren't adding those renewals to their products in the system. That would have triggered a payout to our client who, as you remember, would be getting 82% of that money. Instead, they were cashing the checks, keeping the money, and using the interest in the accounts. Yes, in the mid-2000s, banks actually paid interest to cover losses in their collections department. It was wild to see that this was happening and something had to be done. So I hatched a plan. First things first, secure a new job, because it won't be a fun place to work after this. Done. My previous boss knew of other companies that would scoop me up. Put in my notice and stated in my exit interview that I just couldn't be a part of what was happening, even though HR was in on this. I wanted it on the record. Next, get approval for overtime for all operations crew to come in on a Saturday and double pay them. They arrive early Saturday, obviously not too thrilled as to why they are there. But then I explain that if they complete the task, not only do they get their overtime, but they get nice bonuses. They were much happier. They spent the entire day applying all of those checks dated back years to the client accounts. We're talking millions of dollars. When all of the sales reps arrived Monday, they were shocked as heck. Not only did they meet their weekly goals before picking up the phones, they made their monthly and quarterly goals too. 2 weeks into the new quarter. Cheers, partying, yelling, screaming, celebrating, except sales management. They went from being really excited to skeptical to confused to, oh no, in about 2 hours. They realized where it must have came from. Because not only did the company hit all of these sales, since it had been over a day, the client came into work Monday to see a very nice payday in their system as well. And like anyone, would have questions and says they're coming out to congratulate the team on such great numbers. So management starts scrambling because they can't figure out how this happened, and all under my boss's old login. On my last day, I arrive and in the lobby. I've got my box ready for the last of my things. Guy walks up as we're waiting for the elevator and he strikes up a conversation with me. He notices my box and jokes about getting fired, and I just tell him I had a great opportunity come up, so I decided to leave before crap hits the fan. We laughed. Really nice down-to-earth guy. He realizes we're getting off on the same floor. He asks if I work for X. I say yes. He asks where. I tell him operations, and he reveals that he is the CEO of our client. We go our separate ways. Client shows up, and there's a big party. Afterwards, the client says that they would love to get a breakdown of where most of the sales came from, so they can allocate more money to that department. Management says sure, but it made up a lie about how they can't share client payment info due to regulations, blah blah blah. Cue my exit from the company. 2 weeks go by and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. When I get off work, I checked it to find out it was the CEO of the client where I used to work. He has had something come up and would like to talk to me. Of course, I'm nervous as heck, but I call him back and he picks up on the first ring and we get to chatting for a bit, and he finally just asks me, "Why did you leave?" I tell him I had a great opportunity come up. He doesn't buy it and says that apparently my comment about crap hitting the fan really stuck with him and he thinks something more is going on. So after a little more prodding from him, I tell him, just look at collections, and that's all I can say. He thanks me and I hang up. 2 days later, he pulled the plug on the account. Apparently, my old company tried to threaten him with a lawsuit for pulling the account 3 years early. He replied with, "That's fine, because when I show the courts that I have the evidence that you committed fraud," corporate came in and cleaned house. All of the management was fired within the day. 1 month later, my friend and I had a very memorable trip to Vegas, all courtesy of our old client. Epilogue. Best part. I guess this should have been part of the story. My old boss was an adopted kid, treated his adopted parents great, while their real kids didn't, and when they passed, they left him all of their money. All of it. This was about 2008. He was in a weird place because he loved his parents and was really close to them. He went to his church to pray for his parents and for what to do with his new landfall of money. He loved working but didn't need to anymore. He left the church and went to a bar because, who doesn't? He sits next to a guy who, and this is almost out of a movie, is a developer and has run out of money to finish his development because it's 2008 and no one is loaning money. They get to talking and he thinks maybe this is a sign. I'll speed this up because I've got to run to work, but he invests in the guy's development by buying all of the houses, dirt cheap at the time, and now lives off the residual income from all of them being rentals. Life sucks because so many people do crappy things and get away with it, and it's great when good things happen to good people. Am I the jerk for calling my husband delusional for expecting me to rehire the babysitter after she read our daughter's journal? My husband and I work long shifts. We have 3 kids, and for years we've been hiring babysitters of different kinds to help with the kids. My oldest is my 14-year-old daughter, Lauren. She's been going through hard phases, and her best friend passed from leukemia in December. It impacted her hugely. She received therapy for 2 months and is doing better now, but grief has no timeline, and she misses her besties so much. I do all I can to be available and lend a comforting shoulder. We got her a new journal to write down her thoughts and feelings, and she's been doing a lot better since she's had it. We were looking for a babysitter, and my husband suggested his friend's 17-year-old daughter. I know her, so I said yes right away. She worked for us for weeks, but sometimes teases Lauren about her being uptight, never smiling, giving her the nickname Grinch. I had told her to stop it, but she said she was just messing with her, trying to get her to cheer up. No biggie. Days ago, while I was working, Lauren called me and was crying, saying I needed to come home. I freaked out, and when I got there, I saw the babysitter sitting with the kids. Lauren was upstairs. She said the babysitter took her journal and started reading it out loud in front of the kids while recording herself. I was upset. I asked the babysitter, and she said she was just messing with Lauren and showing her that it's okay to speak emotions out loud instead of bottling it up. She really thought she was helping her overcome her fear to express herself. I yelled, saying it wasn't her place and that she caused more trouble than ever. She apologized and swore she deleted the video, but I told her that she could no longer work for us and needed to leave. She broke down crying and apologizing to me and Lauren, but I refused to let her keep her job. I know Lauren doesn't want to be around her anymore. My husband came home and was upset that I let the babysitter go, reminding me that this was his friend's daughter and I shouldn't have made her leave. He argued that I handled this the wrong way and that I should have been the adult in this situation instead of yelling and kicking her out. I explained what she did to Lauren, but he said, "I agree with you on this. She should have known better, but she didn't. Kids her age make mistakes. What's done is done. She apologized, so we should give her another chance." He kept on about how this impacted his friendship of 14 years. Also said we're now without a babysitter and his trip is this week, so I have no choice but to let her come back, but I said no. She will never step a foot in this house again. He called me unreasonable by referring to everything as if it's mine and he shouldn't have an opinion, and said it's his house too. I ended up calling him delusional for expecting me to rehire her after the stunt she pulled on Lauren, and I won't let it happen because my daughter can't feel comfortable in her home. He got very upset for what I said and stopped speaking to me since. Am I the jerk? Edit. For those asking why we'd need a babysitter with a 14-year-old in the house, first of all, the babysitter is for my younger kids who are 6 and 4. My daughter does not need a babysitter, obviously. Second of all, my daughter is incapable of looking after her brothers for several reasons. She already made it clear, and I wasn't going to force her to do it. Besides that, hiring a babysitter became normal and is part of our lives, but this issue occurred. Well, who do you agree with? OP or her husband? Please let us know. I hope that husband gets what's coming to him. Boss shushes me when I try to warn her of a mistake. So I'm a lawyer in Brazil, but when I was at college, I got an internship at a tribunal. I usually worked behind the scenes, dealing with paperwork and some bureaucratic stuff. It was usually a nice place to work, but occasionally the judge, the boss of my boss, would require some intern to help her with that hearing. It was not unpleasant work, but more of an annoyance since we were only 8 people dealing with the paperwork of over 10,000 lawsuits, which means that every time she requested someone to go help her, they knew that there would be a lot of accumulated work when they got back. Something I need to point out about this specific judge is that she was a very polite and pleasant person outside of work, but at the court, she would become extremely micromanaging, especially about bureaucratic stuff that she never had to deal with and didn't understand, usually making our work take way longer than it needed to be. And whenever a lawyer was present, suddenly she became very rude and demanding to anyone below her. I understand that most lawyers that worked there were extreme jerks, and that this was just probably her response to that, a way to say, "Don't you try me. I know what I'm doing and I'm good at it." But I cannot agree with her taking that frustration on everyone else. On this specific day, I had been assigned to help her with a very long hearing. In Brazil, this stuff is all recorded, so for me, that meant taking care of the computer, taking notes, but mostly making sure that the camera was on. The thing is, whenever you do these recordings, it has a kind of script that needed to be followed. First, she would tell me to start recording. Then she would present herself, tell what case it was being judged, then name the first witness and show their documents to the camera to prove that we were questioning the right person. Only after that, she would start questioning the witness, then the lawyer takes turns doing the same. I'm not sure why, but she was more annoyed with me than usual that day and did everything in her power to show everyone in the room that she was the boss, and I was supposed to just do what she said without arguing. But despite that, she was talking a lot with the lawyers about trivial stuff while waiting for some witnesses that hadn't arrived yet. Finally, everyone is there and the hearing can begin. But for some reason, she was so distracted with the conversation that she forgot about the script and just started questioning the witness without doing the proper presentations and asking me to start recording. As soon as she started questioning him, I tried to discreetly warn her, but all I could say was, "Your Honor," before she loudly shushed me without looking in my direction. It was not at all discreet and everyone was visibly embarrassed, including me. So I did the only thing I could in that situation. Nothing. I couldn't start recording without the presentations and definitely not do it in the middle of the hearing, so I just sat there and waited. After almost half an hour of questioning, she asked me to stop the recording because they would do a small recess. All I could say was, "As I tried to warn you, Your Honor, the video was not recording when you started questioning him." She got visibly white and started saying, "But you should have," before realizing her mistake. She tried looking around for support, but everyone saw the way she shushed me and had that look of, "Well, he's got a point." I don't know exactly what happened after that because they did the recess anyway and I was sent back to my usual work and didn't get to participate in the rest of the hearing. It was a relief because I had a lot of work to do. I graduated a couple of days later and I don't think there were any big repercussions about this specific mistake. But I heard a few years later that, since her productivity was extremely low, and after other, more serious mistakes, she got demoted. She's an auxiliary judge today, which means that she helps other judges but is not responsible for dealing with any lawsuits on her own. Am I the jerk? I work in publishing. Mom keeps giving my contact info to aspiring writers. I am rude to them. I'm a senior editor at a publishing house. First piece of advice I got on being hired was not to tell people I work in publishing because they'll ask me to look at their manuscript. I thought this was a joke, but the first time I told someone that I was in publishing, you get one guess what they said. My mother sees this as a bonus and wants to brag to everyone and their dog about "my daughter the publisher" and "my daughter who could find the next J.K. Rowling" and "my daughter who can part the Red Sea with only a green pen." She finishes her boasting with giving them my contact information. If I've asked her to stop it once, I've asked her to stop it 1,000 times. And yet, I'm still getting contacted by the nephew of my mother's butcher or my cousin's girlfriend's cousin, saying Mom gave them my information so they could throw me their work. I then tell them to get lost. I even have a template that I send back to most of them saying that there is a process in place for a reason, along with an outline of this process. If they get pushy, which they always do, I respond that the reason the process exists is so people like them don't waste my time, as I could be using this time to find a manuscript actually worth publishing, which theirs clearly isn't, because if it was, they could go through the regular channels like everyone else, rather than contact me directly and request special treatment. In conclusion, I'm not kind to these people. The consequence of this is that I'm gradually ostracizing my mother from her social circles as people have begun to blame her for the way that I treat them. Mom has asked that I be nicer. I've asked her to stop putting me in this position. Mom claims that she stopped giving my info to people, and these are just the stragglers, but they just keep coming, so I'm not fully convinced that she stopped giving out my information. I told Mom that if they get pushy after they receive the template, I reserve the right to give them everything I've got. But Mom has said that I'm being really unfair, both to her and the aspiring authors, and that I'm ruining her reputation, so I need to stop being so rude. I said I will deal with them however I feel is appropriate, and this wouldn't happen if she didn't give my info out. She says she learned her lesson, so I need to stop. I said I'll stop when people stop using her as a reference. She says that I'm enjoying humiliating and upsetting both these people and her, and that the next time she hears from me, she's expecting an apology. Am I the jerk? Edit in regards to people saying that I may be costing us potentially valuable authors. If the material can stand up on its own, then they can go through the regular process as we will be able to identify good writing. If they don't trust that we can identify good writing, then they should not be working with us. If they do trust us but want to skip the line anyway, then they are not someone we want to work with, as this suggests that they want special treatment, which will not end with me reading their manuscript and is likely to be a recurring theme throughout working with them. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know. I'd probably get fed up too after a while, to be honest. Nightmare customer tries to build their own off-menu pasta dish, then gets upset when charged full price. Being a picky eater is fine, but at minimum, you have to work with the confines of what's actually available. Enter one stubborn jerk who took the menu items not as a suggestion, but as a point of negotiation. I'm looking at your pastas. Do you have any rotini? No, just spaghetti, rigatoni, fettuccine, and bow tie pasta, I believe. That page has all of the available pasta dishes we serve. Well, you should carry rotini, but I'll start with fettuccine base, and I'd like to add mushrooms, basil, bell pepper. I'm sorry to cut you off, sir, but we don't offer build your own pastas. We only offer what's listed on the menu, and I can make a couple modifications. Well, that's ridiculous. If you have the items, you should be able to make it. It's restaurant policy. It helps the kitchen flow. He stares angrily at me. Well then, I'm gonna need a minute. No problem, bud. I hadn't even asked if your table was ready to order before you started firing away anyway. I talked to the kitchen manager to give him a heads up, and he doubles down on not allowing grand modifications. I return after a few, and this guy's body language tells me he's already preparing an opening statement for the courtroom. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a chicken Alfredo, but instead of the cream sauce, I want bolognese, no tomatoes, I want extra mushrooms, add basil, bell peppers, no parmigiano, and instead of chicken, I want the fresh cod. Sir, I can only do a couple substitutions, and our fresh cod is a separate dish entirely. Look, please talk to your kitchen. It's what I want. This guy seemed like he was just trying to really impress his friends, who all looked pretty mortified. I find the kitchen manager again. He shakes his head and goes, all right, well, ring in both a pasta bolognese and a fresh fish of the day. $42 pasta. Bravo, buddy. The table gets their food, and this guy flashes me the most idiotic smirk like he just got one over on us. See, that wasn't so hard. And by the way, it's delicious. You should think about adding it to your menu. This self-satisfied piece of work. They finally get the bill, and this dude's face is priceless. Well, there definitely was a price to his expression, about $42. Did you really charge me for 2 entrees? Yes, I told you that the cod was a separate dish. He didn't even have much room to argue there. Thankfully, his friend paid and left a fat tip, probably out of vicarious embarrassment. Karen gets a free ride but won't buckle up and enjoys a nice taxi ride home. This was a few years ago, roughly 4. I worked at an office about a 45-minute drive from my house, and I had a friend who worked in the office. I would give them a ride as it was on my way, and I literally had to pass by her house to go to and from work, so it was no big deal. Well, a woman who worked in my office lived really close to her and found out about the arrangements and wanted in. She guilted my friend into asking me since it was on my way, and I said okay. Well, at the same time, my late husband's car was in the shop, so I would make a detour to pick him up, and he's a giant of a man, 6'3", and could not physically fit in the back. So to make things easier, my friend would just sit in the back. Well, the other woman, known as Karen, was a big woman, but not tall, but big. So on the way home, literally the first time she starts getting in the front, I explain to her that she has to sit in the back. Well, we get to my husband's job site, and I park and text. She jumps out of the car and gets into the front. I tell her to get in the back, and she straight up says no, because the seatbelt in the back is too tight and it hurts her. I tell her that's too bad. She can get out if she doesn't like it. Well, she gets out and goes to the back seat. My husband gets in and climbs in, and I start the car, and the seatbelt warning light is on and beeping. She has the seatbelt off. I say, you need to put that seatbelt on. I met with a, no, I can't. It's easier if I'm in the front. Well, I say you're in the back. We're not going anywhere until that seatbelt is on. She crosses her arms like a kid and says, I guess we're not going anywhere. I tell her if she doesn't put the belt on, she can get out and walk home. With a nice bit of snark, she says, well, you better call me a taxi. That upset me, and that's what I did. I called her a taxi. She puts her belt back on, but I say it's too late. Get out. You have a taxi coming. I say you can get out of my car now, or the police will be happy to remove you. She gets out, and her jaw almost hit the road as I drove away. Outside my friend, I never let anyone from work in my car again. Karen loses it in my video game store. I work at a family-owned video game store in a big shopping strip at the beach. We're 80% retro stuff, but we always take modern games and consoles because they move quick, especially these days. I'm working my Tuesday opening shift, going as slow as weekday mornings usually do, when one of my favorite regulars, an old gentleman that loves talking movies with me, and a woman, who I'll be referring to as Country Karen due to her accent, come into the store within a minute or so of each other. I say hi to the regular. Country Karen comes to the counter. I'll tell him I'll be back once I'm done. Regular goes to check out our Blu-ray trades from the weekend. Country Karen starts to explain she bought 2 Switch lights for her nephews, not realizing they already had a regular Switch in their house. Says the kids lost the receipt, entirely her own fault for giving it to the kids, so she can't return it and wants to know what I can do for a cash trade-in. She seems a little frazzled, but I chalk it up to stress and annoyance at her situation, since she explains she just came in from being told no at Target. I take the Switch Lite and take it out of the box. It's about as factory new as it gets, with only a small tear on the box and a few kid-sized fingerprints on the screen I can wipe off. She says she just wants as much money back as she can at this point. I pull up the trade sheet to double-check our trade rates. A Switch Lite retails for $200. We normally sell used for $180 and give $100 store credit or $80 cash. Since this Switch Lite is basically factory new with the box, I decide to give her a bit of a deal. Me: well, normally Switch Lites only trade for $80 cash, but I can do $110 for this because it's a popular color and it's in really good condition with the box. Karen: what? That's so low. GameStop has a promotion and will give me $140 for it. Can't you do any better? Normally, we try to beat GameStop's everything by at least 15%, but being corporate with more employees and less stock per store, they can get specials and promotions done we can't. Plus, we can only match them on trade value for newer consoles, due to the little profit we turn taking them at GameStop's prices. I explain this to Country Karen, and she goes from frazzled and a little impatient to, well, a Country Karen. Wow, I thought you guys would be better than GameStop since you're a small business, but if you're going to nickel and dime me, I'll just go to them from now on. I audibly scoff at the woman's rudeness and tell her good luck. Perk of working family-owned, I don't have to lie down and take crap behavior. She gives me a nasty look, takes her Switch Lite back, and leaves the store. There's a couple in line behind her with a bag or two of game trades each by this point, so once she's gone, I start helping them. Regular brings up a few of our movie trades. All 4 of us start talking movies while I get the games done. Mornings on weekdays usually aren't too bad, but for some reason I had a huge line of nothing but boxes of trade-ins per person come in while I was helping the first 2 guys out, and I was the only employee in the store that day. I finished the second person's trade and excuse myself from the movie talk to focus on powering through the new line of people. I'm about halfway done with the second box of absolute goldmine titles, SNES and Nintendo 64 games, when Country Karen returns looking very unhappy. I put on my best customer service smile and say welcome back. She ignores me, cuts past the rest of the line. Karen: I need to trade this now. I have to pick my nephews up from daycare and need the gas money. GameStop said their promotion is over. Me: sorry to hear that, but I've got other customers I'm helping right now. You'll have to get in line. I said I need to trade this now. They're out soon, and all this running around is going to make me late as it is. I look at gentleman I'm helping, who shrugs and says he doesn't mind. Then at the other 4 people in line with boxes or bags of trades in hand, patiently waiting their turns. The next person in line is watching and giving Country Karen the audacity of this jerk, face I've ever seen. Since it's one item and normally it only takes a minute, I tell Country Karen fine, I'll ring her through quick. I suspend the current trade, take the light, double check it, then add it into the system and ask Country Karen for her ID, which she loudly sighs about and takes a minute digging through her purse. Next guy in line definitely isn't happy with her attitude, makes a comment to the woman he's with that Country Karen and I can't make out. Karen finally finds her ID and hands it over. I enter her info into our customer database, up the trade of the Switch Lite to 110 and tell her the total. Much to my surprise, she balks as if I've just really upset her and indignantly states, You told me $139.99 earlier. I want the money you said I'd get the first time I came in here. Me. No, ma'am. I said $110 because it's... No. You told me $139.99. I want the money you said I'd get the first time, or there's going to be an issue. That's BS, since every single trade in our store rounds to a whole dollar amount. But Country Karen keeps insisting I told her what I'm assuming was the GameStop promotional trade price. At this point, both I and the next guy in line are done with Country Karen. He loudly sighs and says, "Come on, man." But Country Karen either can't hear him or doesn't care. I, on the other hand, give Country Karen another winning service smile. Sure, your trade will be $80 cash then. I can see the few brain cells left in Country Karen's wino head trying to process how the value has gone down instead of up. That's less. I want the money. At this point, she's yelling in the store, so I use my 8+ years of singing bass in church chorus to talk over her without sounding like I'm yelling back. Me. I told you normally switch lights sell for $80 cash, but that I'd cut you a deal for $110. If you want the amount I told you the first time, that's $80. My regular and one of the first two trades are still near the till, and they both pipe up to support me and say I did, in fact, give her those numbers. Country Karen, red in the face and realizing her mistake, starts to backpedal. God, fine. Just give me the $110 so I can leave already. Me. No, ma'am. You were very firm about wanting the first amount, so it'll be $80 cash for the trade. Country Karen looks like she's about to explode before she checks the time on her phone and deflates. Just give me the money. Absolutely. I ring out her transaction for $80, make her sign the receipt saying she agrees to the trade, then loudly count out $80 cash and 20s for her, which she snatches off the counter and storms out of the store with, while the next guy in line is bent over the box of games in his arms, laughing his butt off. Speaking of video games, what's your favorite video game of all time? Please let us know. Breath of the Wild, bruh. Best game ever. Accuse my salesperson of lying? Okay, your service is canceled. I used to be a sales manager for a B2B services company. We provided a service to businesses. Unlike a lot of companies, we would not auto-renew a client's service unless they signed a new contract. The contracts were generally for 1 to 3 years. All our contracts were signed on an iPad that recorded the GPS coordinates of where the document was signed, and we emailed the client a copy of the agreement instantly. And in the email, we basically said, if you disagree with this contract or would like to make changes, contact us within 5 business days. If you don't, we will move forward and bill accordingly. In addition, one of the cancellation terms in the contract was dishonesty. If the client could prove we were dishonest, they had a right to cancel without penalty. If the client acted dishonestly, we had the right to cancel their contract with us. There was a client that was actually quite a small account, but always proved to cause a lot of headaches for my reps. I remember calling the rep and going over the common issues I've seen with this client, and I stressed, get the signature on the iPad in his office. I also stressed that if the client wanted to cancel, let him cancel because he's been proven to be very difficult to work with. Salesman went to the sales call, signature was signed, client service was executed according to the terms of the contract. 4 months later, I get an email from a customer service rep. The client is claiming that my salesman forged the client's signature. I did my due diligence before calling the client. I checked where the newest contract was signed. It was signed in the client's place of business via the iPad. I compared the signature on the newest contract to the many signatures on the numerous contracts we had on file with the same signer from the client. They were all very close. I also looked at the email that we sent to the client right after the contract was signed. The client opened the link to see his contract 65 minutes after the contract was signed and did nothing. Also, the link was open for several minutes. I looked up the client's current billing status. He was 45 days behind. He knew we didn't start charging late fees until 60 days behind, and at 120 days, we would begin litigation and collection account status. I called up the client, and this is how the call went. Me. Hello, this is Luther from ABC. I was told that you are accusing my sales rep of forging your signature on the renewal. Client. Yes, I never agreed to pay that much. I never would have. I told him to give me a discount, and I wanted to see it in writing before I signed. Me. And did he give you a discount and show it to you in writing? No,
He said he had to go talk to his boss, and I never heard back from him.
Okay, and then what happened?
Well, y'all kept up the service, and I noticed on my billing it hadn't gone down, but up in cost. And I looked back in my emails and saw the sales rep forged my signature, and that's illegal.
Me. Yes, you are right. If the salesperson did forge your signature, that is illegal.
Well, good to see that we agree on that.
Me. After the contract was signed, regardless if the signature was forged or not, you would have gotten an email with a link to the contract asking you to verify that everything is correct. And if it's not, to let us know within 5 business days. Did you get that email? If you did get the email, did you review the contract?
Well, yes, but I was pretty busy and didn't open up the email until recently.
Me. I totally get it. We are busy nowadays. So assuming he did forge the signature, what would you consider an acceptable resolution to this? Would you want to end service with no penalty? Would you like a discount?
I would like a discount.
And what would you consider an acceptable discount?
3 months of free service.
Me. Got it. Well, Mr. Client, I got several problems with your claim that my sales rep forged your signature. And before I fire this salesperson for forgery and offer you a discount, I'd like to see if we can't address those problems.
Sounds fair.
Me. The signature was captured on our iPads, which records the GPS coordinates of where the signature happened. Per the GPS coordinates, it happened inside your place of business.
Well, he knows that, right?
Yes, he did.
That just means he forged it inside my building.
Me. Okay. Well, the next issue is that the signature on the renewal contract looks exactly like the previous contracts.
He just copied my signature. I know I didn't sign that.
Me. Could it be possible someone else in your company signed it?
No, everyone here knows I'm the only one that gets to sign those contracts.
Me. I understand. The next issue I have with your claim is that the link to the contract that was emailed to you was opened 65 minutes after the contract was signed.
No, it wasn't.
Me. Yes, sir, it was. The reason why we have you click a link to view the signed contract is so we know if you open the link or not. Not only that, it appears like the link was open for several minutes, which to me would indicate that the person who opened that link reviewed the contract. Also, the fact that no one ever responded to the email would indicate to me the person who reviewed the contract was fine.
Are you accusing me of lying?
Yes, and because of that, I will be canceling your service with us effective immediately. How would you like to pay your current balance?
You're canceling my service and want me to pay?
Yes, I want you to pay for the services we provided.
I'm not going to pay.
If you're not going to pay for the services we provided, I'm going to have to refer you to our collections department, and they will add late fees, and if you don't pay them, they will refer you to our law firm for litigation.
We have a contract. You can't just cancel my service.
Actually, I can, since I have good reason to believe you're lying about the accusation that my salesperson forged your signature. Everything I have says you signed it. Our contract states that we cancel your contract for being dishonest, and that's what we are going to do.
Forget you.
He hangs up. I referred the client to collections. He eventually paid them without us having to sue him. Honestly, we probably would have just sold his debt to a collection agency due to the dollar amount not being high enough to be worth it to sue. Hotel guest overreacts, resulting in him being charged $1,000 extra. A few evenings ago, a guest wrapped in a pool towel came to the front desk and tossed his keys on it, informing me that they aren't working. I apologize, remake the keys, and send him up. He comes back downstairs, tosses the keys back on the desk, and says that it still isn't working. He tells me a yellow light is coming up, and when this happens, it means that the card reader on the door needs to be reprogrammed, which takes 20 minutes. This happens very rarely, and we always make it up to the guest. I inform the guest of this and tell him that my maintenance guy left 20 minutes ago, but I will have him back to fix it right away. As I call the maintenance guy, the guy starts huffing very heavily while staring at me with his eyes wide open. I inform him that our maintenance guy will be here in 20 minutes. I said I'm comping his breakfast from yesterday, then tell him that if he wants, he can head back out to the jacuzzi and we'll send him some drinks on us as well while he waits. Him.
I will not do that. My girlfriend is upstairs waiting for the door to open in my suite that I paid to use.
Me. I apologize for that, sir. As I mentioned, my maintenance guy will be here in 20 minutes, so if you can bear with me until then, we'll get you into your room.
I don't want to go into my room in 20 minutes. I want to go into the room that I am paying $400 a night for right now.
Me. Sir, this is completely our fault, but you must understand that sometimes things out of our control can happen. It'll just be 20 minutes until he gets here, and we will, of course, make this up to you. Him.
I'm paying $400 a night to stay here. I want to go to my room now, not in 20 minutes.
Me. I understand that, but like I said, there's a problem with your card reader on the door that only our maintenance guy can fix. I want you to get into your room, but we can't until our engineer gets here.
So, you're not going to let me into my room?
I want you in your room. It just physically can't happen because of the problem with the key reader.
So you're not going to allow me into my room that I pay $400 a night for?
This goes back and forth and continued on for a few more minutes. Me. Sir, you need to lower your voice. I admit that this is our fault, but that doesn't mean you can scream.
I will not lower my voice. You're not allowing me to go into my room.
I'm allowing you to go into your room. You just can't because of the card reader.
So you're not letting me into my room?
I let you go into your room. I'm perfectly fine with you going in your room.
But I can't.
Yes, because your card reader is not working. He then asked if he could go into another room while he waits. But at this point, I was done with him and his crap and refused to help him. I told him no. I then told him that this conversation is finished and he has to wait. A few minutes later, I felt a burst of wind from outside and felt bad that his girlfriend might have been cold because of his stupidity. I make keys for a room next to theirs and give it to him so she can go inside. He takes the keys, his girlfriend refuses to go into the new room with him. He gets in, then slams the door shut, leaving her outside. Once engineering starts working on his door, he hears the guy talking in the room. Later, the engineer told me that the dude was on the phone with his mom complaining about the hotel. We got his room ready. I went to tell him, and in front of me, he's still repeating,
Mom, I'm spending $400 a night here, and they're not letting me into my room.
Anyway, I guess him and his girlfriend fought because 2 hours later, she leaves the hotel with her bags. He then walks in and out of the lobby a few times for a few more hours while walking slowly and staring at me wide-eyed. Everything he does angrily. Pushed open the front doors hard, slammed on the elevator buttons, etc. Every time he closed his room door on the 4th floor, a guest would call, asking what the noise was because of how hard he was slamming it. Suddenly, at around 9 p.m., I hear a loud slamming sound over and over again. I get like 10 calls from scared guests. Turns out, this dude was just in his doorway, opening and slamming his door shut over and over again. I call him and tell him that if he slams a door one more time, he's getting kicked out of our hotel. Well, he slammed it repeatedly again. He came downstairs around 9:30 p.m. to check out as I was calling security to kick him out. While I was in front of him, I got a call from a guest asking what the sound was. In front of him, I told him that it was an out-of-control guest, but not to worry because he's getting kicked out of the hotel. I handed him his receipt, which he crumpled up and threw on the floor before walking out. The next day, housekeeping reports that the door frame is shattered. Per the general manager, we charged him $1,000 for the broken door frame. I also added the comped breakfast back onto the bill. Best part, 2 weeks later, I saw a 1-star review from him stating,
They wouldn't let me into my suite that I was paying $400 a night for. Ruined my anniversary. Would not recommend.
Can't leave before the end of my notice period? No problem. Last month, my manager drops a bombshell. The company has decided to scrap the big project that my team has been working on for the past 2 years. We must wrap up everything and, starting from June, we will all be moved to different teams. Now, I'm a data analyst, and the company doesn't have an open project that requires a data analyst. So they looked at my profile, saw I had some basic knowledge of programming, and decided to move me to the dev team. Both me and the dev team think it's an insane idea, because I will need lots of training before I become useful, and I don't even want to be a full-time dev. But upper management hasn't bothered to ask for our opinion before making all of the arrangements. I immediately start looking for a new job, and as luck would have it, there is an extremely high request for data analysts in my area. Within a few weeks, I have an offer in hand and I give my notice. My contract, I'm in the EU, is very strict regarding notice periods. A resigning employee must give 2 months' notice. This is entirely for the benefit of the company that will need to find a replacement. The same applies when a company fires an employee. They must give the employee 2 months' notice. However, it's possible to shorten the notice period by mutual agreement. So when I sit down with my manager and HR, I tell them I'd like to give only 2 weeks' notice and leave at the end of May. I tell them that I've already started wrapping up my activities before my move to the dev team, and I don't have any ongoing projects that I need to transfer to my colleagues, so 2 weeks out would be more than enough to finish documenting everything. They say absolutely no. I have to stay here for the entire 2-month period, which is fine by me. My new job doesn't start until August, and I don't mind being paid in the meantime. The only reason I suggested shortening the notice period was because I thought I was doing the company a favor. I thought I'd be stealing their paycheck if I stayed for 2 months, even though I don't have anything left to do. But since they pretty much told me I was being unprofessional or that I was trying to cut and run, okay, I'll take their money in exchange for sitting around doing nothing for a few more weeks. You may think, but Renticle, they're going to find some boring task for you. Well, they can certainly try, but the projects they're working on are so different from what I do that I'm pretty much useless to them. For example, someone will ask, "Can you do XYZ?" And I will honestly answer, "I've no idea what an XYZ even is, but I will be happy to help if you teach me." At that point, they'll say it would take too long and it's not worth it to train me since I'm leaving soon. So my working days now go like this. I show up at 9 a.m. sharp and go to my office, where I'm the only person since the others were moved to different teams. I have a leisurely second breakfast, check my email, then I send a message to our team's group letting them know that I'm free and to ask me if they need help with anything. Then I remote into my home PC and play until lunchtime. I have lunch, coffee, I chat with my coworkers. They're quite nice. It's too bad that upper management is crazy. I'm going to miss them. In the afternoon, I usually check Reddit. I chat with my friends if they're online, play a bit more, and I'm out of the door at 5 p.m. By the way, they would like for me to vacate the office so they can use it as a meeting room, but they can't until I leave. There are no empty desks anywhere. The dev team already hired someone else and has no space. So, tough luck. A Karen complained to me about the free food at a high school dinner theater show. I was in theater for all 4 years of high school. Every year, the sophomore class would put on a medieval-themed dinner theater that parents and other family members were invited to attend. They got free dinner and a show. My role was a dancer/waitress. The most I had to do for the waitressing part was fill up people's waters and serve the food. It was a preset menu, so it's not like I had to take orders or anything. In the middle of the show, after I did my dancing part, it was time to serve the food. It was chicken, mashed potatoes, and I think a side of veggies. After the families ate the food and watched some more skits, I went to collect the plates. This Karen death-gripped my arm and said her chicken was flavorless and that she was waiting a long time for someone to come around and ask her how her meal was. Apparently, she wanted to send it back. I really thought this was some mom trying to be funny with me, but no. I was just a 15-year-old girl and didn't know what to do. I got my teacher, and she said she'll handle it. I don't know what happened after though. This Karen really thought she was in a restaurant, and these 14 to 16-year-old kids were actually experienced servers. I was most baffled when she said she wanted to send the food back. To where? It came pre-made and already cooked from the grocery store and was assembled on plates by the teachers in the back room. I think maybe she thought the cafeteria staff was in the kitchen cooking it or something. Also, during rehearsals, we weren't told to go back and check on guests and see how their food is, because again, this was not a real restaurant. This situation is funny to think about because it's kind of like if you're playing with a toddler and they make you food and hand you a plastic piece of cake, and instead of pretending to eat it and make yummy noises, you throw it on the ground and say you hate buttercream. This felt like a similar version of that. I also never figured out whose mom that was. Do not make contact with anyone from work. Once upon a time, I was working with a major Australian telecommunications company. I worked in a call center with a group of underemployed lateral thinkers. It made work great as you were always discovering new things, but it made us a bit of a challenge to manage as the department tried to hobble us to fit into the cookie-cutter molds they expected of call center operators. We had a manager who was, if I was to be generous, useless. He once went on leave for 2 weeks without a replacement being arranged. I put a balloon with a face drawn on it at his desk as our interim team leader. Team productivity under Mr. Balloon was measurably better than when the team leader was there, and I proved it with reports and all. Suffice to say, our manager did not command respect. Fast forward a few months, and one of our colleagues figured out how to spoof emails. Our manager had a certificate he proudly presented on his desk saying he had graduated something college, having completed a course in frontline management. He was extremely proud of this, and so the target vector was clear. My colleague went to an internet cafe, back when they were a thing, and sent a spoofed email to our manager. The email was built to look like it was from something college. The email demanded that manager provide evidence of his competence as a frontline manager or his certificate would be withdrawn. Now, manager's world was appropriately shaken when he got this email. He must have complained to the appropriate higher-ups because the InfoSec squad jumped straight onto it. They traced the email back to the cafe's IP address. Okay, in retrospect, we could all see this error in judgment. They printed out mugshots from the company's internal directory and identified my colleague as being the person who sent the email. Colleague was pulled into a day's worth of meetings as manager, manager's manager, etc. all leant on him pretty hard, trying to get him to confess so they could dismiss him for misconduct. I think the company realized they were on shaky ground to try and prove that colleague had really done anything wrong. Oh, the days before bullying was codified. Having sweated colleague all day with no effect, manager's manager put him on paid leave pending investigation with strict instructions: do not make any contact with anyone from work, as they didn't want rumors of a pleb messing with the ruling class getting out. Months pass. Colleague has not been in the office. The company has completed their investigation, but need to let colleague present his defense. But his mobile is disconnected, and he has connected a new phone number with a competitor. And he has moved home, and he is not replying to emails. He has ghosted, and the company doesn't know what to do. More months pass. I guess it gets to a point where the company can declare colleague legally dead, or at least say he has abandoned employment. They stop paying his wages. A few months pass. Manager's manager is walking through a business district in the city and runs into colleague. Colleague is in a flash suit with a briefcase, obviously hustling to a meeting himself. Manager's manager says, "Hello," asks colleague what he's been doing with himself. "I work for the major tech company now. I've been working with them since a couple of weeks after I was put on paid leave. I would have told you, but I was told not to communicate with anyone from work. Thanks for that second paycheck though." Lady tries to get in my car while I'm trying to parallel park. A couple years ago, I was back in my hometown after being gone a few years interviewing for a new job. I love the city I'm from, and I had deliberately planned to be there for my birthday weekend so I could spend some time in some of my old haunts. I decided one day I would stop by the locally owned coffee shop where I used to spend hours consuming coffee and free Wi-Fi, catch up on old times. Now, the coffee shop is located along a very busy 4-lane street. During off-peak hours, though, it's legal to parallel park in the lanes closest to the sidewalk. I've always hated parallel parking, but I decide it's easier than waiting for a spot to open up in the very small parking lot in the alley behind the coffee shop. I luck out, and there's an open spot at the very end of the road, so I just need to pull in. But it always makes me nervous pulling in because of how busy the road is, and when I get nervous, I get worse at parallel parking. So I pull up and start backing into the space, and I think I'm doing okay, when suddenly my back door flies open in the middle of me straightening up my car. A middle-aged lady just starts picking up a bunch of bags and trying to stack them in my back seat. The lady just starts trying to load her stuff in my back seat. Confused and still halfway in the road, I ask her, "May I help you, ma'am?" She replies, "No, I just need to get all my stuff in and then I'll be ready to go." I still haven't caught on yet, and I'm like, "Why do you need to load your stuff in my car? Where are you going?" "Well, I need to get the stuff in the car so you can take me to the location." I think I suddenly realize what's going on. "Ma'am, I'm not an Uber driver," I say. "I'm trying to park so I can get in the coffee shop." Now keep in mind, at this time I was driving a 2011 Chevy Malibu that's seen better days. A couple dents, a smashed front end. This is on top of the fact that I'm pretty messy in cars and my entire back seat was filled with stuff from work to garbage. It wouldn't have passed the inspection if I wanted to be an Uber driver. I checked once when I was desperate for ways to make money. On top of that, there's no indication on my car that I'm an Uber driver, and I'm literally trying to parallel park my car. Surprised, she stood up, and her actual driver was on the side street just in front of us trying to flag her down. It was at that moment she finally realized what was going on.
"Oh well, never mind then,"
She said as she took all of her stuff back out of my car and marched over to her actual Uber driver as I finished parallel parking. No explosive entitlement like other stories, but I swear, someone is going to get in a car one of these days thinking it's an Uber and become story fodder for r/let's not meet. And yes, I got the job, and it was a great birthday weekend. I was so happy to be going home, even if there's some weird people there. My Karen neighbor won't stop cutting my grass. I know the title sounds bad because she's technically doing me a favor, but hear me out. I work third shift and oftentimes get home at 5 or 6 a.m., but can't fall asleep until about 10 a.m. most days. I'm a very light sleeper and I live in a trailer, so my walls are extremely thin. I don't get mad about my other neighbor cutting their lawn. While it is annoying to listen to, it's their lawn and I don't control them. However, I've explained to her twice now about my job and how I sleep, and this is the third time she has started mowing my lawn. I told her explicitly that she didn't have to do it anymore and that I would truthfully rather her not. Leave my own house chores to me. I am a grown woman. She seemed to understand. As I write this, she's mowing my lawn. It's 11:30 a.m. I understand this is a normal time to mow lawns, but this is my property. I should also note that she uses my mower and my weed whacker for this, but doesn't often replace the gas in the mower or forgets to plug in the battery for the whacker. I have a plug in my shed specifically for this. I would go confront her again, but that would be the third time, and I'm honestly considering just beginning to lock my shed and at my gate. I've never had a problem with her before, other than the fact that she lacks a lot of common sense, and I have to explain things to her often despite her being well into her 50s. I'm not going to the park manager because I don't think it's that big of a deal, but kind of feel bad that I'm angry with her for doing something that benefits me more than it doesn't. Am I the jerk? Edit. The reason I don't want to lock the gate and shed is because our other neighbor, an elderly lady, comes and borrows our tools occasionally for her garden. I'm going to be locking it anyway before I leave for work today and go back to explain to aforementioned older lady that she can use my tools, but I'm hiding the key in an area close to the shed, and that's where the key will be from now on. I have a spare inside. Edit 2. I've taken advice from a few people and I'm going to get a copy of the shed key made for my older elderly neighbor and let her know the situation, but be clear that I don't want her to take action. She is the park manager. I'm not going to be hiding my key, just keeping it inside because she is observant and will probably find where I hide it without realizing it's hidden / from her. All in all, thank you to everybody who provided actual constructive replies and helped me figure out my situation. Here's to hoping next week I won't wake up at 11:30 a.m. to weed whackers outside my window. Cheers. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you try to get Karen to stop cutting your lawn or not? Please let us know.
Nothing better than a riding lawnmower and a Monster Energy on a Saturday afternoon.
Guy tips big to impress his date, but returns later to take back his money. We had a guy come in last night with his date. Throughout the evening, he was the picture of courtesy and good manners. He complimented me, thanked me every time I came to refresh his water or check on the table, made a point to be forgiving of a kitchen mistake, super extra nice. The dream customer, really. I appreciated it, but didn't delude myself that I was the source and figured he was just in a good mood because the date was going well. They were chatting, laughing, and having a great time, so I assumed I was an indirect beneficiary. He was certainly in some kind of celebratory mood because he was sparing no expense. He asked for our highest quality wine. She got our most expensive entree. He ordered one of every appetizer for her to sample when she made a remark that she was having trouble deciding. It was a real feast. So the evening starts wrapping up and I get their check. I ask if they'll be together or separate. She starts to say separate, but he makes a big deal of saying, "Oh, are you kidding? Together, definitely together. You never have to pay when you're with me, babe." And so on and so forth. Then slides me a credit card. I get everything sorted and bring out the receipt. He fills it out and it came to a $289 total. He doesn't even blink and makes a big show of leaving a $100 tip. He thanks me for my service and emphasizes what a lovely night they had. Of course, a tip that size is exceptional, so I thanked him profusely. He said there was no need to thank him and goes on a big tear about how underappreciated waitstaff are, and to just think of it as a stand-in for all of the ingrates who didn't treat me right, going, "Don't plan to tip, don't plan to eat out, you know?" Looking at the mesmerized girl the whole time and not giving me a glance. I could care less where he was looking. I was looking at the upcoming $100. I thanked him again and said I hoped to see them back soon, and that was that. So he helps her into her coat and off they go. Great night. I was riding high. About 90 seconds later, he's back in the door without her, going, "I think I left my..." Then, when the door shut and looking to make sure she was out of earshot, he goes, without the slightest shade of shame or embarrassment, "Mark the tip down to $20, hun. I was just playing it up for my date. You understand?" And turns to go. I understand, but not how he hoped I would. But I couldn't make a scene in the middle of work. That's not my place. So I just said one more time in order to give his conscience a chance to sink in. "Okay, sir. You'd like me to amend your tip from $100 to $20? Is that correct?" And even though I didn't show a hint of displeasure in my voice, he shot back, extremely hostile. "Yes, and if I see a cent over the 20 on there, I'm going to dispute the whole meal with my credit vendor. So, don't try to pull anything." The most frustrating part of this for me was not even going from an over 30% tip to under 10%, but rather that this poor girl was being strung along with no idea of who the guy was behind her back. It was extremely manipulative of him, which is a major red flag. I've had my fair share of toxic relationships in the past and really wish someone had pulled the blinders off my eyes, so desperately wanted to do something to alert this girl to the trick the guy had pulled, hoping it would be a catalyst to her questioning his other actions. But again, I was at work, and that just wasn't my place, so I altered the bill, and that was that. Then, just in time, something occurred to me, and I darted outside hoping to catch them in the parking lot. I got lucky. They had parked on the street instead, and he was still dealing with the parking meter. So I flagged him down and rushed across the street, nearly stumbling into traffic in my haste for a delicious moment. His date was already in the car, but rolled down her window, since no one expects the waitress to follow you out to your car, waving her arms like a crazy person. I made it across and said, more than loudly enough for her to hear me, "Sir, we amended your tip from $100 down to $20 as you requested, but you'll actually need to fill out a different receipt reflecting your new total for our records. Your old receipt still has your original tip of $100 written on it, but since you just came in and asked us to charge you $20 instead, we can't have a discrepancy in our records. I hope you understand. This is just a bookkeeping regulation that goes way above me. It has nothing to do with your retroactively downgrading your tip from $20 to $100. We're just glad you enjoyed your evening." His jaw was on the floor. He tried to pretend as though he didn't know what I was talking about, trying to give me some line about, "I think you're after someone else. I had only come back in because I forgot my keys." But I would not let it rest. The more he played dumb, the more I repeated versions of, "You wanted to change your tip from 100 down to 20. You came back in," and on and on. So we went back and forth for a few more seconds when finally he went, "Okay, whatever. Sorry for the miscommunication. If you need me to fill out a new receipt, I can." And I, totally even-keeled, was like, "You only need to fill out a new receipt if you want to change your tip from $100 down to $20. And I'm guessing he didn't have the money in his account, because he did it. He filled out the new receipt, his girlfriend was visibly shocked, and the man was staring daggers through me. You could feel the rage emanating off him. It was vicariously quite satisfying in place of the other toxic people I never get that confrontation with, and all the bad tippers. Ironically, the exact kind he made a righteous speech decrying just a few minutes beforehand. And then off they drove. I'm sure never to patronize our restaurant again, but hopefully never to go out together again either, which would make it totally worth it. Entitled kid wants free pizza forever, gets banned instead. Cast: we've got the manager, we've got me, we've got nice employee, May, and we've got Karen, the ever-entitled bomb. So I'm a store manager for a large chain pizza place that charges a bit more than the competition but makes an arguably better product. We try to always believe the customer and make them happy if something is wrong. We have a loyal base of regulars who order often, as well as a lot of other business from randoms in the several nearby hotels. Friday night, entitled Karen calls in an order, very simple pep and jalapeno pizza. Driver delivers it. 30 minutes later, I'm asked to talk to an angry customer on the phone. Karen,
Is this the manager? I've been on hold for over half an hour.
impossible, but okay. Me, I'm very sorry about that, ma'am. What seems to be the problem? Karen,
I'm at the hotel, and your driver was so rude, and my pizza is burnt.
me, sorry to hear that the pizza was not up to our quality standards. Can I make you another and send it out?
No, don't bother. You have already ruined my kids' dinner, and they are crying now. Give me credit.
Red flag. Me, okay, ma'am. I'll credit your number, and when you order next time, it will be free. I'm very sorry again. Have a good night.
Whatever.
She hangs up. I credit the number and think whatever, that's the end of it. Saturday night. Hey, this lady on the phone wants to speak to a manager. Me. Hello, thank you for holding. This is me.
Are you all stupid? How long does it take to answer the darn phone?
Me. I'm sorry, what? We've only been on hold for a moment while my employee got me.
Don't tell me how long I've been on hold. I know how long I've been on hold for.
I'm groaning inwardly already. A fun customer. Yippee. Me. I'm sorry, ma'am. How can I assist you?
My pizza is burnt, and you have the rudest delivery driver ever. They practically threw the pizza in my face.
Light bulb clicks at this story. I've dealt with this lady before. Me. I'm sorry to hear that. I'll definitely talk to the driver about it. Can I make you a new pizza to replace the one you said is burnt?
No, give me a credit.
Me. Okay, ma'am. To ensure our quality standards are being met, can I have a driver come pick up the burnt pizza so I can talk to my production staff about it?
No, we ate it.
Me. You ate the burnt pizza?
Yes, we were starving and couldn't wait for a remake, so give me a credit.
Me. For the pizza you ate?
It was burnt. Let me speak to a manager.
Me. I am the manager.
I want to speak to your manager. You are being so rude and disrespectful. You don't know who I am, but you're about to find out.
She then hangs up before I can say anything else. Being as she was extra, I let my DM know about a possible complaint on my behavior and what actually went down. Just as I get off the phone with her, I hear yelling in the lobby. Karen.
Where is that jerk manager?
I step around the partition and see this Karen wearing tacky bright green and orange with red shoes. Me. Can I help you? I'm already done with this jerk because I know who she is. Karen.
Gonna say something now? Give me my refund for the burnt pizza, and I want gas money for driving over here.
Me. You didn't pay for any pizza. It was free. We don't reimburse gas for people driving to the store.
You think this is a joke? You're going to give me my money, or it's gonna go off in this place.
I'm 100% done at this point. Me. Get out. Karen.
What did you say?
Get out of this store.
You can't tell me to leave. This is a public place.
No, ma'am. It's a private business, and you are no longer allowed here. I'm refusing to serve you. Leave now, or I'll be forced to call the police.
Forget you.
She continues to bellow this until the police arrive. I had to hear every sing-song version of Forget You for about 5 minutes. Police. Do you want to trespass her? Me. Yes, she isn't welcome here anymore. Police in our town are super cool with us because we give them special discounts and occasionally donate a stack of pizzas to the precinct. Police just outside main door easily heard. Okay, so you are now being trespassed. Do not come here, do not linger in the parking lot, or you will be arrested. This applies for every single pizza store, not just this one. The defeated look on her face when he said that was almost worth the cost of admission. Not the most epic ending, I know, but what can you do? Speaking of pizza, what's your favorite place to get pizza from? Please let us know.
I could really go for some Papa John's right now. That butter sauce, yes.
You're working 20 minutes more every day? Unacceptable. In the early 2000s, I was living in the Commuter belt and working in central London. For those not familiar, London only has one train line running through it from north to south. The rest of the lines terminate at somewhere on the circle line of the underground roughly. For your average commuter, that means your local train will go between 1 and 4 stations, and so you'll favor jobs on your side of the city to save getting a bus or tube. But for many, it involves 1 or 2 of them too. For me, I only had one destination from my local station, which was a tiny, slow trains-only one, and it wasn't the station right across the road from my office. To get there, I would have to make a change. This added to the journey time just enough that I was 5 minutes late to work every day. However, I've lied to you. There was only one and only one train a day that went to the station I wanted, but it left an hour earlier and got me in an hour and 20 minutes earlier. There was also a single train back in the evening 30 minutes after I clocked off, so my daily routine was to get the train with a change in the morning, arriving 5 minutes late, and in the evening I'd work 25 minutes extra and get the direct train home. With the station being so close, I was fine to leave it that close to the wire. I usually got a seat, even cutting it, so fine, all was good, for about 18 months. For some reason I do not understand, maybe it was my fighting with the guy who kept assigning me work, even though he wasn't my boss. My actual boss relayed that his boss, the head of IT, was unhappy with me constantly being late. I was young, I was naive. I thought they'd understand that I was working a net plus 20 minutes every day. My boss was actually very cool and didn't want to be dealing with this, but his boss was making a stink. So he explained to his boss, and the reply came back that I must be in on time because those are your contracted hours. I was young and naive, but that doesn't mean I was a pedantic little jerk. I proceeded to get the early train, losing an hour's sleep each morning and arriving at the office an hour and 20 minutes early. Took my shoes off, put them up on my desk, set an alarm, and did my best to claw back that lost sleep. As people trickled into the office, I refused to work or even answer a phone until I was within my contracted hours. Come clocking off time, I would pack up and leave to go stand at the platform for nearly 25 minutes, staring off into the distance, thinking about all of the work they are losing from me. This lasted about a week before I was told I can't sleep at my desk, so I found the smallest break room that had a sofa and made that my nap spot. It wasn't comfortable, but I was upset at how strict they were being. Of course, I carried on going home when my contracted hours were up. A few weeks later, my chance came. The crap had hit the fan, and they needed me to work late. As I said before, my immediate boss was cool, and I had a "I know you know what I'm really saying when I say this" conversation with him about how this was outside my contracted hours, but I understand that there is a give and take, and that when it's needed or doesn't cause an issue. Give and take, right? After that evening, I started showing up 5 minutes late again, and nothing was said about it again. I also started staying right up until my train was due, sometimes. Edit. To say that I didn't get paid overtime unless it was approved beforehand. Like the day it hit the fan, I just worked the extra to finish up what I was doing. And because I was young and dumb enough to think hard work got you somewhere. Also, I worked late sometimes to make sure I was actually working the number of hours I should, but I didn't cut it so fine for the train. And I didn't do it most days anymore. Revenge of the Highway Construction Boss. First things first. This is a story that an old friend / coworker of mine told me years ago. This friend has since passed, R.I.P. Greg, so I am unable to go back to him to get more details. Greg's family lived near Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Greg's dad was in construction, working as a job site foreman, and Calgary was going through an oil boom in the 1980s, and new roads and highways needed to be built. The practice at the time, probably still is, was to get expensive surveyors to lay out the path for the road at the start of the project, and the path was marked by wooden stakes in the ground. These roads were going through some of the grasslands on Calgary's outskirts, and good progress was being made on the road in question. Then one morning, the crew got to the job site and found out that all of the stakes had been knocked over. Calgary had, maybe still has, its fair share of yahoos and pickup trucks who like to cause trouble. So from tire tracks, they figure that during the night, someone had found the job site, noticed the stakes, and decided it would be fun to drive over all of them. I suppose today's yahoos and pickups would be deterred by cheaper surveillance cameras, but this was about 30 to 35 years ago. Greg's dad was fuming, but he had to call the surveyors back in to do the layout again before they could continue. A few nights later, the same thing happened again. They arrived at the site, found all of the stakes knocked out again. Another call to the surveyor's office later, they had the road mapped again, but Greg's dad had a plan. Construction sites can have a lot of rebar and other types of iron and other metals lying around. They also have lots of heavy equipment for applying force to things. After the stakes were mapped out for the third time, Greg's dad got a crew together to drive an 8-foot-long piece of iron vertically into the ground, directly behind one of the stakes near the end of the road layout, with the top of the iron in line with the top of the stakes. Then he waited. A small number of days later, he got to the job site and found a wrecked pickup truck in the field along the road's path. Its oil pan and other undercarriage components had been ripped off by the metal post that was protruding from the ground. They had signs all around the site indicating that unauthorized vehicles were prohibited. Entering was at your own risk, so they were covered from a legal standpoint. With the truck as evidence, they were able to find its owner and have him charged with trespassing, destruction of property, mischief, and anything else that they could make stick. I have a long-lost sister? So this story was around 2 years ago, back when I was 17. I had my own tennis clothing and equipment business. Till my 18th birthday, my dad owned the business as well. We were shared partners, but I mostly ran the shop by myself, which means the opening times were quite weird. It was open Monday to Friday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Sometimes I would open it later due to the train connections from my main workplace to the tennis club. And on Saturdays, it was open from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., midday, and from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. due to me still wanting at least some free time. Now on this day, my train ran a bit late, so I was rushing to open up my shop. It was a Friday, and usually one of the more hectic and busier days. Many students of my dad and members of the club wanted to check out the new batch of tennis rackets and clothes that we got from the firm we work closely with and wanted to try them out. Most of them were very understanding though, and I knew them all by name, at least most of them. After opening up shop, letting them in and having them look around and helping out wherever I could, I went to this one lady and her kid, who I had never seen in the club or the shop. We shall name the mother Tanya, due to me knowing more entitled Tanyas than Karens. The conversation went like this. Me: "Hi, how may I help you, ma'am?" Tanya:
Why didn't you help me before? Where were you at 5 p.m.? God, no one can do anything correctly here. And letting someone so young here serve, they should be ashamed.
I was personally very confused, and a few other customers were as well, since they knew I might have a panic attack and that I was the son of the coach here. Me: I'm very sorry, ma'am. I couldn't be here earlier due to Tanya.
I don't want to listen to your poor excuses. Give me one of those rackets and give me a 50% discount.
I looked up at where she was pointing, trying to calm myself down from this stressful situation. She was pointing at the most expensive and newest racket we just got today. I then looked at the kid, who couldn't have been older than 10. Me: "Ma'am, is this for you or for your daughter?"
My daughter, of course. Just give me the racket so I can leave. I know the owner since I'm his daughter.
I was very well confused at that point since, well, I didn't know I had another sister who was around 30 years older than me. Me: "Ma'am, I'm asking because I need the correct hand size for the grip and weight." I tried to explain due to it being a major problem for giving people a tennis arm, which basically means pulling a muscle, straining your wrist too much, and just being in pain. I go crouch down and politely ask the girl to put her hand against mine to see the size, asking her age and how long she's been playing. All of the normal questions if you go to a good sports store. Tanya, who was next to us, started rolling her eyes and making clicking noises with her mouth and other noises that indicated she was being impatient. The next thing I knew, though, she was grabbing my hair and pulling me up. Tanya:
Just give me the racket. This should be free due to me being the daughter.
I saw my opportunity and knew I couldn't wait any longer. The others in the store were looking at us quietly and smirking slightly. I nod my head and go to the back door, which leads right to the tennis court where my dad is. Me: "Dad, your lost daughter turned up," I yelled. He looked at me confused, but I made some eye movements, indicating we had a weird lady in the store. He nodded and went in. Dad: "So, you're my long-lost daughter. I didn't know I got my old classmate pregnant back when I was in school." That's when everyone started laughing. Me: "Yeah, Dad, didn't know I had a sister. When did you want to tell me that I had an older sister?" Dad: "To be honest, I didn't even know I had a girlfriend at the time." The woman's look on her face was priceless. It went from confused to angry to very embarrassed, all whilst everyone in the store and her daughter were laughing. She huffed and stormed out of the store, basically dragging her kid behind her. Since then, I've never seen her. Note: I met up with a few other business owners in the area, and they all had this same lady come in apparently. But a certain fact is that most tennis stores in the area, or in any club, I think, is owned by the tennis coach who never has an employee. So basically, you can't try that with us. Am I the jerk for not making coffee how my fiance wants it? Weird title. I, 23, female, no. But this has been a point of contention for a while. My fiance, 25, male, is a foodie and is extremely particular about a few things, one of them being his coffee. We use a manual grinder, get distilled water. The water in our area is really hard and according to him affects the taste, but I don't notice anything. And we have an AeroPress and a metal coffee filter to make the coffee. I'm very much not a foodie, unless being a Sour Patch Kids connoisseur is a thing. My fiance weighs his coffee beans to make sure that he's using the exact right amount, changes the setting on the coffee grinder depending on whether he's using the AeroPress or the metal coffee filter, measures the water, and if he's using the AeroPress, lets the coffee grounds and water brew for a certain amount of time before actually making the coffee. On the other hand, I use a scoop to measure my coffee beans, use whatever setting the grinder is on, we'll usually just use tap water, eyeball the water instead of measuring it, and don't let it sit to brew. And you know what? It's fine. It tastes fine. It makes me happy. The end. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Problem is that this really bothers my fiance. We've had multiple arguments about me making my coffee wrong, and it's very normal for him to badger me to weigh my coffee beans or switch the coffee grinder to the optimal setting while I'm making my coffee. If I'm making coffee for him, sure, I'll measure the beans and all of that jazz because I know that he can taste the difference. But I don't think that I should have to jump through all of these hoops for something that doesn't affect him. On the other hand, he seems to be really bothered by this. Today, as I was trying to scoop coffee beans into the grinder, he reached around me to put the scale he uses in front of me and asked me to please weigh my coffee beans. I was really frustrated because we've had this conversation so many times, so I snapped the word no at him, and he walked away and muttered, "You too," saying that even though I hadn't said it, I'd definitely been thinking, "Forget you." For the record, I wasn't even thinking that. So, am I the jerk for not making coffee how my fiance thinks I should, and for sometimes snapping at him when he gets pushy about it? Edit. I don't know if this is important, but I drink decaf and he drinks regular, so I'm never making coffee for both of us. I'm either making coffee for him or I'm making coffee for myself. Edit 2. I sat him down and told him that I needed him to never comment on how I make my coffee and how I was making it. He repeated it back to me in his own words to check that he understood me. A counselor once told me that this is helpful to do in an argument, and then he agreed. Am I the jerk for leaving my friend's girlfriend stranded in another city? Last week, I got a call from a friend asking me to drive her girlfriend into a major city in my country. He asked me because he knows I enjoy driving and I don't get nervous in packed traffic. Plus, the girlfriend barely drives and hates going into the city as there are lots of restricted streets and such. I told my friend my plan was reading a book that weekend, so he insisted a bit further, saying I was doing him a huge favor since he was out for the weekend and that girlfriend would use her car, so I didn't have to put unnecessary kilometers on mine. After telling him I was just doing it because he asked and that I had nothing to do inside the city, I finally agreed. Cue Saturday. I go pick up his girlfriend early in the morning. We grab her car and I see it has only a half a tank of gas, enough to get us there but not enough for a round trip. She acknowledges it and tells me we'll fill up in the city. Whatever. During the 3-hour trip, she kept complaining I was going too slow and that she was going to miss an important appointment. I was going the speed limit the whole time. Once we got to the city, we parked in a prepay and she asked me to pay since she didn't bring any cash. Whatever. I wanted to go to a park and read while she was busy, but I had to run errands with her because she didn't feel safe in the city center on a sunny day. Whatever. She even got mad because I asked her to make a quick trip to the car to leave some bags because I didn't want to carry them. And she told me her boyfriend always carried these bags and it was faster. I started to get annoyed here and I told her no. Once she got done with all she had to do, we went back to the car. Before I got in, she mentioned I still hadn't given her the money. When I asked her what she meant, she said I had to pay for half of the tank as I had gone with her. I got mad and said I was doing my friend a favor and I wasted my day just for her to buy random crap. I wasn't paying. She said something like, "Either pay or you don't get into the car." I stormed off. tired and angry while she shouted something like,
Yeah, you'll come back.
I didn't. I got a train ticket and spent some 4.5 hours to go home while my phone was burning up with calls and messages. I turned it off. I got home and the next day my friend called asking what happened. Apparently some poor soul had to go pick her up because she wasn't driving home. I told him and he said that girlfriend can be difficult at times, but I pulled a massive jerk move, leaving her alone there at sundown. So, am I the jerk? Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or was the girlfriend? Please let us know.
I would have left her there too. She sounds like a Karen Jr., to be honest.
Karen demands to meet my boyfriend. So I, 27 female, have lived with Jay, 30 female, for 4 years. We started off as housemates. She is now my closest friend. 6 months ago, I met D, 29 male. He lives on his own, so I spend most of my evenings and weekends there as it's just more convenient. He doesn't really love hanging out with people he doesn't know, so it just works out better. I recently told Jay that I will be moving in with D in a couple of months. I thought she would be upset, but she just said okay, and it wasn't until I asked her if she thought I was making a mistake. She said that she couldn't have had an opinion as she had never really met him. He has been over once or twice, but only for about 10 minutes each time as he was picking me up. She said she thought it was odd that we had never really all hung out, especially as I have spent quite a bit of time with his friends. She then said that it was rubbish that we never spent any time together anymore, and that it was clear that as soon as I moved out, we wouldn't be friends anymore. To fix this, I suggested that when he finished work yesterday, he would come around to our place and we would all hang out and have dinner, etc. So he finished work, messaged me, and suggested that we go play tennis for a couple of hours before dinner. I told my friend, and she replied that she has a little housework to do, but could then be free for that. I apologized and clarified that I just meant my boyfriend and me, and that I would be back in a couple of hours for us all to hang out. She got really upset and said not to bother, as clearly I didn't want to spend any time with her, and that today was supposed to be time for them to get to know each other. I tried to reason with her that I was going on a date, and she couldn't expect to come with us on a date, but she was still really annoyed. She said that she can't believe I would throw away a long friendship on a guy, and asked if I was embarrassed of her. She ranted for a bit, saying that she has always met other friends' partners, and they end up becoming friends too, and said that she wondered if he was controlling and stopping me from seeing people just because I quit my netball club because it took up too much of my time. I must admit that I got angry and accused her of being jealous because I have found someone and she is still single and older than me, and that my relationship is nothing to do with her and that I just like spending time with the person I will probably end up marrying. I haven't spoken to her since yesterday, and looking back, I probably did overreact, but I think it's ridiculous that she is assuming about things that she doesn't know about and thinks that she could actually be invited on a date. So, am I the jerk for wanting to spend time with my boyfriend? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her friend? Please let us know.
Yowza canowza. I can't wait to read these comments.
Guest demands a comped stay, ends up getting charged $850. Guest attempted to check in around 3 p.m. into a prepaid reservation. Despite it being prepaid, we have a $300 security deposit that is mandatory. Her card was declining for the deposit, so we could not check her in. Guest left the hotel around 4 p.m. and ended up coming back with her friend around 11 p.m. Her friend spent $100 on an Uber to come to our hotel and put his card down for the deposit so she could check in, then had to Uber back for another $100. That's a good friend right there. The next morning, she brought me down a piece of paper filled top to bottom with her demands. First, she wanted her entire stay comped. Second, she wanted additional comped nights in the future. Lastly, she wanted comped room service and breakfast. Her reasoning? We didn't let her check in due to her card declining. Her:
So, what do you think?
Me: we can't comp things for you because your card declined. That is not an error on our part. Her:
Oh, so you're basically just blaming me then?
Me: I'm not blaming you for anything. I'm simply stating that it is not the hotel's fault that your card declined.
I had to wait hours since I couldn't check in.
You couldn't check in because your card declined.
My friend had to spend $200 on an Uber to come here. He lives very far away, but he came all the way here to put his card down for me. All this trouble for a deposit.
Me: He had to do that because your card was declining.
Yeah, okay, everything is my fault.
Me. What would you expect the hotel to do in a situation where your card is declining? If we don't have your card on file, then we can't check you in. It's not our fault that your card was declining.
Her. I am a movie producer from London. My card has declined because I'm traveling.
Me. I don't doubt that. But again, we can't give you comped things because your card declined. Her.
Oh, and I guess that I'm such a horrible person and everything is my fault because my card declined.
I didn't say that. She left the front desk. Luckily, that day was her checkout date, so we wouldn't have to deal with her much longer. Or so I thought.
Her. I'd like a late checkout.
Me. Unfortunately, I cannot offer you a late checkout.
Why?
Because we are booked tonight.
Every single room?
Yup. She hangs up. At 11 a.m., security informs me that the guest is outside speaking to different guests. I walk out there, and other guests tell me that this crazy lady is bothering them. As I walk up to her, she was sitting with two random guests. Me. Excuse me, gentlemen, is everything okay? Anybody bothering you? Them. It's fine, we're okay. Her.
The only person bothering them is you.
Me. So you guys are sure everything's good? Them. Yeah, it's fine. Her.
Bye. You can go now.
Me. Remember, checkout time is 12. I start walking away, then turn around and say, oh, and if another guest complains about you bothering them, you will be kicked out of the pool. Eventually, 12 p.m. checkout time hits. I make sure that security goes to her room first as part of the do-outs. They inform me that her bags are all over the room. However, she is not there. We do smell cigarette smoke coming from the room, and an inspection reveals that she had been smoking extensively in the room. That is a $500 fee. I authorize $500 on her friend's card since that is the only one we have on file. 1 p.m. hits, then 2 p.m., and the guest does not come back to the hotel until 6 p.m. I post a $300 late checkout fee to her room as well. With the smoking fee, late checkout fee, and resort fee, the total we have placed on her friend's card is $850. When she came back to the hotel, we told her that we cannot release her items to her until we get a signature by the cardholder accepting these charges. The guest threw a fit, screamed that she is bringing the media and the press to the hotel, then left. The next day, I get a call from her friend asking why he was charged $850. I inform him of everything, and he is shocked. He said that she's having a midlife crisis right now, and her mental space is not normal. He then said that this $850 charge is outrageous. He said he didn't know what he was signing up for when he put his card down. I told him that putting his card down for her was essentially him taking responsibility for her reservation. I explained that I feel bad about it, but charging his card was not my decision. I also said that since we couldn't release her items to her, her bags are still in the room. The card on file will continue to be charged for each day the bags remain in the room, and we will only move the bags out of the room once we get an authorization form signed for the charges. He said he will gladly pay the $350 for the late checkout fee and all that, but said the $500 smoking fee is too much. He said if he is charged $850, he'll open a dispute. I asked the GM, and the most we could do is offer 50% off on the smoking fee. Instead of $850 charged, it was now $500. I emailed him back letting him know, and per the GM, mentioned that even if he gets it disputed with his credit card company, the hotel will still pursue payment in court. He ended up accepting and signed an authorization form accepting the charges to his card. We then went to her room and put all of her items in a bag. She ended up coming back to pick them up at 3 a.m. We told her to wait outside and we will send someone out to give them to her as she was not allowed on the property. Overall, I felt really bad for the friend. He Ubered a great distance to come put his card down for his friend. She ended up getting him on the hook for $850, and his first instinct was to compliment her character and explain to me that she's just dealing with some things right now. But it is what it is. The hotel had to do what it had to do. Either be fired or accept a massive pay cut. Okay, I'll take the firing. I worked for this company for 14 years. I loved working there for 12 of those years. There were two main parts to the job. The first part was the sales side of things. This was away from the office and the customer's location. This involved quite a bit of driving and on a couple of occasions flying abroad to work face-to-face with the customers to deliver a high-quality product. We weren't the cheapest, but we were the superior product, and I was the best employee when it came to delivering the product. I constantly got rave reviews from customers for my personal style when it came to delivering the product and executing the customer's vision. I got a huge amount of repeat business, and I got a lot of new business through word of mouth with customers recommending the company based on their experiences with me. The second part was the office side. This was my weaker side. I hated cold calling potential customers with numbers I found in the phone book. When it came to answering the phone and speaking to potential customers who initiated contact with us, I was fine, but I wasn't great at making the calls. This was my only real, not so great part of my job. So in the office, I wasn't asked to make any calls. Instead, I prepared product, designed new product, trained new staff members, ended up being one of the biggest parts of my job. I was also the problem solver, helping out whenever and wherever, filling in for sick employees wherever I could. I liked the owner and I liked the manager. I liked all of the staff who were around me. All in all, it was a great job that I was really good at and took pride in. The company had been doing so well that the owner had slowly expanded over the 12 years since I started working for the company. I had joined about 3 months after he started, so I had been part of this expansion. I worked out of my nearest office, but often traveled to other areas to train their staff. I was loaned out, as it were, to other companies to help train their staff. At one point, I was a guest lecturer at a university teaching medical students how to deliver complicated explanations to people who don't have the base knowledge that you yourself do. After 12 years, I was on a decent salary. Not massive, but I was happy. Then the owner decided to sell off part of the company. He was selling the area where my local office was. He told me he would love for me to remain as his employee, but I would need to work from a different office. This would either require me to move or to quadruple, at a minimum, my daily commute. The other option was to remain working from my current office, but with a new boss. I chose the second option. Before the new owner bought the company, she worked alongside the staff for a couple of weeks to see how we operated. This was before any of us knew she was about to buy the company. As far as we knew, she was just another employee, and she was shadowing us to learn. She came with me on assignments in the field and saw my abilities. When the sale was announced and we were informed that she was the new owner, everyone was very surprised. She made some sweeping staffing changes. The manager left to start her own business since the new owner was also going to be the manager. A lot of staff were let go. The secretary, myself, and a couple of newer hires were kept on. The new hires were on the lowest wages, not salaries. Anyone who had got to a decent level was let go. Since almost everyone was on a 0-hours contract, she was able to do this. Whilst technically it was a new company, for the customers it was the same old business. The company still had the same trading name. The only real difference was that there was a new owner and the registered business name was now different. As far as the customers were concerned, nothing had changed. My job for the first few months after the sale was to train up the remaining staff to replace the more experienced staff members who had been let go. I recommended a couple of new hires who I had experience working with in the past. I was open and honest with the owner and let her know that one of them was a close friend and one of them was my girlfriend. Both were more than qualified for the work and both were happy to join. My friend had recently come back to the country after a year of traveling, whilst my girlfriend could only work during school holidays, worked in the school. The owner gave them both interviews, then hired them, since we needed the staff. Over the next 2 years, business started to fall. The reason was simple. The new owner decided to try and maximize profits by increasing prices while decreasing the quality of the product. For new customers, this wasn't noticeable. They just thought we were expensive and the product wasn't the best. But for old customers who had been with us for over 10 years, they immediately noticed. They were being charged more and were receiving less/worse quality. So the owner doubled down and increased prices again. 95% of our old customers left us. New customers almost never became repeat customers. Complaints skyrocketed. Whilst all this was going on, our staff turnover rate was ridiculous. People left after a few months when they realized that the minimum wage they were being paid wasn't worth it. Under the old owner, the average hourly wage for new employees was around 2.5 times the minimum wage. This made people care about their jobs and want to keep them. My girlfriend quit. My friend remained but was looking for something new. Then I got a phone call. The owner needed me to come to the office. This was unexpected. I had just finished working on location with a customer. The next customer was in 2.5 hours. It was a half-hour drive away. The office was about an hour and 10 minutes away from both locations. If I drove back to the office, I would have about 5 minutes in the office before leaving. My mileage was paid above my regular salary, so I was saving the company money by doing this. Also, parking was a nightmare around the second location, so I intended to get there as early as possible to find parking, then read a book. The manager didn't care. She needed me to return to the office, so I did. I arrived back to be handed a letter by the owner. It was informing me of a disciplinary meeting to take place in a couple of days' time. I could bring a witness along if I desired. This knocked me for 6. I was the best employee. I had read through her list of complaints about my performance and started working on my defense. At the meeting, I declined to have a witness. Instead, I decided to record the audio of the entire meeting on my phone without informing her. Where I live, this is legal, and I didn't need consent. The boss witness was her friend who she had met at yoga and hired for an office role, firing the secretary who had been there long before the takeover. Every point she raised, I could counter. They ranged from the week, "You were unavailable to work for a week in August." I booked a week's holiday so I could attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country and turn it into a holiday. To the pathetic, "You were late for work on the 12th of May. Is that the day my car broke down and I called the office to let you know?"
I don't know.
I do. Here's the receipt from the garage dated May 12th. To the downright lies. This one I can't write as a quote. Basically, she accused me of gross misconduct for breaking health and safety laws in the way I was delivering a product for a customer. I hadn't broken health and safety laws. I knew exactly what I was doing since, as I've mentioned already, I had been working here for 14 years at this point. She had witnessed me do this on multiple occasions and had never mentioned it before because it wasn't an issue. She even had me train staff in this specific delivery method because it wasn't an issue. She finished her list by telling me that she doesn't want to lose me, but she can't justify keeping such a poor employee at my current salary. I had 2 choices. I could either sign a 0-hours contract and work for minimum wage, or she could fire me with 2 weeks' notice. I countered that she would have to give me 12 weeks' notice since my contract guaranteed me 1 week's notice for every year of employment, up to a maximum of 12. She argued that I had only been her employee for 2 years, since before then I worked for the previous owner. I informed her that with how the business takeover had run, it counts as continuous employment. I quoted the exact law and code that backed me up. She asked for a 30-minute break in the meeting to let me think about her offer. She went to call her lawyer. When she came back, she informed me that since she was firing me for gross misconduct, she didn't have to give me any notice at all. If I wanted to remain and move to the 0-hours contract, I could do that today. But if I didn't, then she would have to fire me. But because she was nice, she would give me the 2 weeks notice. I asked for a couple of hours to go home and think about this. She allowed this. I knew the reason she wanted me to remain for at least the 2 weeks was because one of our few remaining bigger customers was set to have a product delivery from me in that time. They would only work with me. The owner had tried sending other staff in my place on several occasions, and each time there had been problems. It wasn't the staff's fault. It was just a very difficult delivery for a very specific customer which needed to be perfect. As a result, this customer would only deal with me. I called the office and spoke to the owner. I declined the offer of a 0-hours contract and said I would be leaving. She then said she was giving me my 2 weeks notice. I declined her offer of 2 weeks notice. I informed her that if I was being fired for gross misconduct, then surely I cannot be relied upon to safely deliver the product. Therefore, it would be best for everyone involved if I didn't return to work. She panicked and that she needed me for those 2 weeks. I feigned ignorance and let her know that I was just thinking about what's best for the company. After all, you can't have unsafe staff delivering your products to your customers. However, if she wanted to rethink the gross misconduct accusation, then I would work my 12 weeks notice. These were her options, 0 weeks or 12. She chose 12. For those 12 weeks, I worked the same way I had for 14 years. I didn't coast, I didn't slack. I didn't badmouth the company on my way out. I continued to train new staff. I continued to deliver the product in my own personal, exceptional way. I also got in touch with a lawyer who was a specialist in employment law. For those 12 weeks, the owner barely spoke to me. She resented the fact that I knew my legal rights and didn't just believe her lies. She hated the fact that I could defend myself. She was petty. She accidentally dropped my mug in the kitchen, breaking it. Most petty of all, She paid for every member of staff in the office to have a spa day except me. I was asked to work my day off to answer the phones whilst everyone else was being pampered. Nobody knew I hadn't been invited until they arrived at the spa and I wasn't there. Here's the thing, I'm a big bearded guy. I have no interest in a spa day. If she had offered it to me, I would have thanked her and declined the kind offer. But by pointedly excluding me, she was making herself look terrible. For the last 2 weeks, I was training up my friend to basically take over from me. At the end of the 12 weeks, my final day came around. The owner had nothing planned, not so much as a card after 14 years, 2 for her. The office assistant manager who had become a friend had got me some presents, but had to give them to me once the boss was gone for fear of reprisals. The day after my final day, 2 things happened. The first was my friend, who I had been training up to replace me, quit. He was on a 0 hours contract, so required no notice. He was unhappy with her treatment of me and was unhappy that she expected him to do my, previously salaried, job for minimum wage. He hadn't informed me of his plans to leave, and I only learned of it when he knocked on my door in the middle of the day when he should have been at work to let me know. The second was the owner received a letter informing her that I was bringing legal proceedings against her for constructive dismissal. I had arranged this with my lawyer to be delivered the day after my final day. According to the office assistant, she went pale and started crying before leaving the office to call her lawyer. She refuted my claims to constructive dismissal, said it was gross misconduct, tried to come up with some more reasons for firing me. But the truth was that the company was making less money because of her business practices, and I was the highest and only salary. I had evidence that I was a great employee. I had evidence that she had asked me to move to a 0 hours contract. She initially tried to deny this since the gross misconduct fabrication makes no sense if she wanted me to stay. But once my lawyer provided hers with a transcript of the entire meeting along with a copy of the recording, she knew she was done for. Still, she let the case drag on for over a year. I think she hoped that the legal fees would lead to me dropping the case. Little did she know, my lawyer was working on a no-win, no-fee basis, whilst hers wasn't. She ended up settling out of court. The aftermath. The office assistant, who had become a friend, quit a couple of months after I left. She hated how I was treated and didn't feel safe working for such an untrustworthy boss. Several former customers contacted me personally to inquire why I was no longer with the company. Apparently, the owner was telling them that I just quit. I informed them that I had been fired for cost-cutting reasons. They moved their business elsewhere. Several offered me jobs. One went so far as to offer me a part-time job and to pay for me to attend college to earn a degree required for them to hire me full-time. This was a lovely offer, but they were one of the customers who was a bit too far for me to commute, and I wasn't ready to move. In the end, I found a new job in a different industry where a lot of my skills transferred over. Currently earning more than I was, working less hours, and for better owners. The business is floundering. Lockdown left the new owner desperate for cash. She canceled orders but refused to refund customers' money, citing an act of God clause in the contracts. The business Facebook and Google reviews have tanked. Most staff left. The business is still afloat, but barely. Have you ever had a boss who tried to fire you wrongfully? If so, what did you do about it? Please let us know.
Nothing's worse than a boss who tries to do over their employees.
Have fun running a restaurant with no recipes. So this story belongs to my father, but it's pretty fresh, and I thought I would share it here as it fits perfectly. There's a pretty long explanation before it though. If any Germans read this and find mistakes, I personally don't know many details about German law, and I'm repeating what my father told me. Among a few other things, my father is a chef. It's something he went to a proper school for and worked at for the past few years. Recently, before all this lockdown stuff, he worked at a Greek restaurant in Germany as the chef with a few kitchen helpers, which basically means he cooked everything while the helpers did odd jobs like washing dishes, peeling veggies, washing meat, etc. Due to lockdown, all restaurants in Germany were forced to close for an indefinite amount of time, but the government promised to pay people an aid calculated based on your monthly pay. Hence how my father found out his boss had been scamming him on the contract. Apparently, in Germany, the employer side can do everything related to the contract side on their own, as long as you provide them with the proper documents, without you actually seeing the contract yourself. They just set everything up. You can start working, and they can provide you with the contract later to sign it, which most people do. but my father is sadly too trusting and never asked for it. Turned out he was given a part-time contract, with the rest of the pay being added as a bonus under the table, while still working full-time hours plus often overtime. This resulted in his lockdown aid being significantly smaller, not nearly enough to survive for a month, and due to various reasons, he didn't have much spending money. When he learned of this, he immediately decided to contact and confront his employer, and he was basically told to either deal with it or quit, and that he is very much welcome to report them, not that it will matter anyway. So this is what my father did. Quit and went out of his way to come to Germany and report it, and oh boy, did it matter. First fallout. My father was the only person to know all of the recipes for the dishes they sold. Most of them used his own secret ingredients, and people loved them. Since he started working there, the restaurant boomed in terms of popularity. He, however, never wrote those recipes down, and while the owner might have been Greek, he didn't actually know any proper recipes. He just knew how food ought to taste. Some German regions are about to open their restaurants, and this place, smack in the middle of a popular resort area, doesn't have a single dish they know how to prepare, and already a pretty long list of reservations waiting. Second fallout. My father did report them, and Germans take their labor laws very seriously. The restaurant was investigated, and they were given numerous fines, in the tens of thousands of euros range, paid to the state for this, while they were also forced to pay my father all his due pay, because legally he worked full-time hours, proven by cameras and testimony of people in the area, as the owner tried to lie about his work hours, and officially was only paid part-time. This put the restaurant deep into the red, with a very high chance of having to close up and sell their place to pay off everything. And initially, all my father wanted was for his employer to just cover the other part of the government aid that he lost because of his contract. They're all the same, just grab one. I'm a parts manager at a dealership that sells, among other things, parts for small engines. Think mowers, generators, snowblowers, etc. When customers come into the store looking for parts for small engines, we almost always need a model and serial number of the engine in order to look up the correct fit to get them the correct part. 8 out of 10 times, the customer does not have this information, or they have the wrong information, like the model of the mower, not the engine. Obviously, we'll try to help the customer to avoid them having to leave to get the info and then come back. We'll ask if they bought the equipment from us, or if it had been in for service, then the model might be in our system. Sometimes we're able to ask enough questions and get enough details to be able to make a good guess as to the part that they need. Sometimes there's nothing we can do and the customer has to go back and get the model number. When you ask for the model and serial number, most of the customers are understanding, but sometimes they utter the worst 5 words you can say to a parts person.
Why? They're all the same.
That's what Phil decided to do. Phil, a 50-year-old, chip on his shoulder, contractor type, storms up to the counter and says he needs a carburetor for a water pump. Do you have the model and serial number? Phil huffs.
Why? They're all the same.
I start to reply, no sir, they are not all. He then starts to raise his voice, just short of yelling, and tells me he needs a carburetor. They're all the same. The job he's on is shut down until he gets this equipment fixed. I ask if the equipment had been here before. It hadn't. I explained to him that they're not all the same. There are thousands of different carburetors and that he'll have more downtime if we get him the wrong part. He's not having any of it. He turns beet red and finally breaks and yells at me.
Just grab me a carb.
You got it. I tell him I'll be right back. I go into the parts room to the very back corner where we keep old obsolete stock that's been there for years, and I pick a very particular carburetor. This carburetor had been misordered a few years back. It fits one very particular engine, a very old engine, and because of that fact, it was the most expensive small engine carburetor we had. Most carburetors for small engines run $25 to $125. This puppy retails for $299.99 and had been an eyesore on my inventory numbers for quite a while. I bring it out to the counter and tell him the price. He scoffs and hands me his card. I explain our return policy on fuel-related items. They cannot be returned if fuel touches them. He doesn't really pay attention, pays for it, and leaves. 2 hours later, one of my coworkers grabs me from the back and says a customer is asking for the manager. I ask what's going on. Coworker explains that a customer is upset because he can't return a carb because there's fuel in it. I smile because I know who it is. I go up to the counter and see it's Phil.
This is the wrong carb. I need to return it.
I'm sorry, Phil. I thought you said they were all the same. He turns beet red again and just says he wants to return it. I look at the packaging. It's torn open and it has dirt all over it. But most importantly, it reeks of old gas. Why would he connect the fuel line to a carb that won't fit is beyond me. I'm sorry. I can't accept this. It has fuel in it. I explained this when you purchased it. We go back and forth for a while, and he eventually accepts defeat and just asks to buy the correct carb. I ask for the model and serial number, and he still doesn't have it. He leaves to go get it and comes back with the correct numbers, and we sell him the correct carb. Bought my Karen girlfriend a new iPhone. Sadly, it was the wrong color. It was my girlfriend's 23 birthday, and I, 25 male, got her an iPhone 12 Pro, as she's been wanting one for a while, so I saved up and it was very expensive. When I surprised her with it, I was expecting her to be excited, but instead, she told me that she wanted a black one, not a white one. The thing is, she never told me she wanted black. She just always said she wanted the phone itself. When I told her I didn't know, she told me that I ruined her birthday and just left. I was honestly in shock and disbelief that she was so upset about a phone color. I didn't know what to do with the phone and planned on taking it back. But then I remembered that my sister, who's 19, just had a baby and unfortunately had to drop out of college to find a job. I decided that I was going to give the phone to her since the phone she had was not working well anymore. I told her that I would give the phone to her, but I still had to check if my girlfriend changed her mind. So I texted her saying, "This is your last chance to change your mind about the phone because I plan on giving it to my sister." And she just texted me back, "I don't care." I asked her one last time, and again she said, "I told you I don't care." So that was that. A few hours later, I was in bed when my girlfriend came in and asked me where was her phone, and I told her, "I thought you didn't want it." "I'm sorry, but it's too late now. I already gave it to my sister." She got angry and started shouting at me, saying that she thought I was joking and that it was her phone, so I had no right to give it away, and started stomping her feet, saying she wanted her phone back right now. I lost my cool and told her, "You are an adult behaving like a kid who didn't get their way. I asked you twice if you wanted the phone and you said no. Now, please leave me alone and stop behaving like a toddler." She stomped her way out of the room and texted me saying that I was a jerk, and now all of her friends are ganging up on me. So now I'm wondering, am I the jerk? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know.
The only way you're the jerk is if you stay with her. Dump her already and let her be someone else's nightmare.
Am I the jerk for not paying for my stepkids' college? I, 49, have two stepkids, Leo, who's 19, and Adam, who's 17. I entered their lives when they were 7 and 5, and despite my efforts, they never warmed up to me. I wasn't trying to be their mom, but just another loving parental figure. They told their dad how much they didn't like me when he told them that we were engaged, and told my husband that they didn't want him to get married. Their dad reassured them that they would always be a big part of his life and asked them to give me a chance. We even went to their mother for help, but she refused. They refused to come to the wedding and wouldn't spend the holidays with their dad if I was there. I was hurt over it for a very long time, but eventually grew to accept that this is how things were going to be and just tried to focus on my own kids. Although my husband always held out hope that one day we could all be one big happy blended family. Unfortunately, my husband passed in an accident. It was hard, and after that, Leo and Adam never reached out to us again. They barely acknowledged their half-siblings, who are both 9, at family events with my husband's side of the family, and I was sad for them. Fast forward to now, and my niece, sister-in-law's daughter, is going to college, and I agreed to give her $30,000 after sophomore year. My husband loved his sister and niece, so I was more than happy to do it. Word got back to Leo and Adam, and they learned that their father had a huge life insurance policy that I was the sole beneficiary of. Plus, my side business is now turning over a sizable profit. They reached out to me, angry that I was hoarding their father's money and threatening to sue if I didn't tell them how much I got and get half. I was upset, but calmly explained to them that 1, life insurance isn't the same as an inheritance, so they had no legal claim to it. 2, when I initially received the payout, I gave some to their mom to hold on to for them until they were of age. They didn't believe me until I sent them proof, and apparently their mom used the money to cover living costs and there was nothing left for them. Since I used some of the insurance money to fund my business, mother-in-law is asking me to pay for Leo and Adam to go to school, but I don't want to. They literally haven't spoken to me in years, and the first time they do, it's to demand money. Mother-in-law asked me to think of my own kids and how Leo and Adam may take out their resentment towards me on them. If that's the case, then I don't care to foster a relationship between them. Am I the jerk? ETA. I keep seeing this, so I'll add it in here. 1. The life insurance policy was through my husband's job, and I was automatically named. My husband could have changed it, but didn't get around to it. 2. While my stepkids were never named in the policy, there was always an understanding between us that I would give up some of the money to help Leo and Adam out, which is why I gave it to their mom. 3. No, there wasn't an official will, but it was my husband's intention to make one once he turned 60, but this happened in his late 40s. 4. As for the survivor's benefits, I can't say if Leo and Adam got some since their mom and them never talked to me, and I never received anything in the mail about it. I'm guessing their mom took the money I gave her and didn't think that she would need anything else. ETA again. Keep seeing this as well, so I'll comment here. 1. While I don't feel comfortable giving the exact amount, I will say that I gave their mother around 40% of the overall policy. It's the same amount that I saved for my own kids, while keeping 20% for myself as the spouse. Part of my 20% is what I used to start my business. 2. I didn't put the money into a trust for them because I trusted that their mom would do what she thought was best for them and didn't bother to keep tabs on it. 3. Up until they called me, I didn't know my stepkids didn't have money for college. 4. Neither my husband or I had wills at the time because we thought we were both too young for those, but since his passing, I have made one for myself. 5. My stepkids are welcome to try, but I doubt that they can sue me for anything because most of my husband's savings went to paying funeral costs and any debt he had prior to his passing. The house we lived in was a gift from my side of the family with the condition that it would be solely in my name. 6. I also love sister-in-law's daughter and have a relationship with her, which is one of the reasons why I'll be giving her $30,000. It won't take care of all of her expenses, but it is a good start. Well, what do you think? Should OP pay for their stepkids' college or not? Please let us know.
I wouldn't pay anything for those little monsters. They made their bed. Now they get to lie in it.
Won't let me have my operation at a hospital 20 miles away? Fine, I'll spend a week at a hospital 4 hours away instead. This happened about 10 years ago, not long after I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I live in the UK, so we were lucky to have the NHS. However, the rules can differ in different parts of the UK. At the time this malicious compliance occurred, I lived in North Wales, about 4 miles from the border of England. With endometriosis, there are 2 different types of surgery you can have to remove it: excision and ablation. Excision is much more effective, but can only be performed by specialist surgeons at certain hospitals which are classed as accredited endometriosis centers. In order to be classed as one of these specialist centers, a hospital needs to perform a certain number of very complex surgeries each year amongst other criteria. At this time, if you lived in England, you had a right to choose where you were treated. So if you had endometriosis and lived in, for example, Liverpool, but your local hospital wasn't an accredited endometriosis center, you could choose to have your surgery in Manchester instead. Wales had a similar rule, but you could only choose to be treated at another hospital in Wales. Doesn't sound too absurd in principle. However, Wales had 1 accredited center at the time, Cardiff, South Wales, and England had about 20. I had already tried ablation surgery and it hadn't worked. I was in extreme pain every day and was getting to the point where I was unable to work or go to college. I went to see my GP to ask for excision surgery. I mentioned the right to choose, which I had been told about, and asked if I could be referred to a specialist on the Wirral, which was a 20-minute drive away. I was told this wasn't possible as it was over the border in England and that I could only choose from hospitals in Wales. Where I lived, I was so close to the border that the nearest big town was in England. Until the month before, I had worked in England every day. I crossed the border to England every time I went to do my weekly shop, but I wasn't allowed to go there for healthcare. The only specialist in Wales, as I mentioned, was in Cardiff, which was a 4-hour drive away. When I asked my not very good GP what else I could do as I needed the surgery, his reply was, "Not a lot, unless you're willing to go to Cardiff for it." This is when I had my idea. I calmly turned around to the doctor and said, "Okay then." You see, the thing with excision surgery is, Although it can take several hours and be a large operation, in most cases they will let you go home the same day as long as you have someone to collect you. So I calmly explained that yes, I'd be happy to travel to Cardiff. However, my dad couldn't drive that far, so I wouldn't have anyone to bring me home. This would mean they'd have to keep me in for up to a week until I was well enough to take the train home, as opposed to sending me to the hospital 20 minutes from my house where my dad could pick me up the same day. I got a call the next morning to say they had approved my request to have the operation at the hospital just over the border. My grandpa versus the evil teacher. My grandfather has told me this story, and I only recently realized it was malicious compliance, so I decided to share it. My grandpa is ambidextrous and liked to switch whatever hand he was writing with for the other when his hand got sore. Unfortunately, at the time, left-handed writing was seen as a sin, so if he ever used his left hand, he would get hit with the ruler. Fun times in the 1950s. One year in grade school, he got this really mean teacher who made her students write until their wrists hurt. She made them write long papers about things my grandpa can't remember, and every time she saw Grandpa give his right hand a break, she'd smack him with the ruler. Now, my grandpa is a stubborn man, always has been, but he's also very clever. So the second he got the chance, he pulled what he likes to call the fast one over her. This one day, his teacher had everyone write about something and told them that no matter what, she didn't want to see the pencils leave their right hand. My grandpa had a light bulb moment and decided to obey her to the letter. The teacher forced Grandpa's class to write until lunch before collecting their papers. Then, when everyone was eating, she made her rounds. Imagine the look of shock on her face when she saw my grandpa eating his sandwich with his left hand and still holding the pencil in his right. She screamed at him before smacking him with the ruler and telling him to eat properly. Grandpa tells me each time how much he struggled not to laugh when he had told her that she said she didn't want to see the pencil leave his right hand. He was subsequently dragged to the office and had to sit through a lecture by the headmaster. But my grandpa remained stubborn and repeated that he had been told not to let the pencil out of his right hand no matter what. Grandpa was given classroom cleaning duty during recess as punishment, but he still wouldn't let go of the pencil. He always laughs as he shows me the range of facial expressions his teacher would make because of his stubbornness, but Grandpa told me he just kept repeating her words of "no matter what" back to her. At the end of the day, Grandpa was sent home with a paper insisting upon a parental meeting over Grandpa's stubbornness and a lack of respect for his teachers. Grandpa's dad, my great-grandpa, Grampy, actually thought it was a riot, according to Grandpa, and would tell me about how Grampy laughed off the headmaster and teacher, telling them that his son did exactly what they told him to. Not to mention that since the teacher said no matter what, Grandpa has a right to hold on to that pencil. Grampy then treated Grandpa to sweets and told him to keep it up. Granny, great-grandma, almost pitched a fit, according to Grandpa, until Grampy managed to compromise with her. Grandpa would only hold the pencil on school grounds. Grandpa told me that Granny still didn't approve but decided to let them reap what they sow. It got really funny, as according to Grandpa, he came to school every day with the pencil in hand. It got better because eventually the pencil couldn't be used anymore due to all of the excessive writing, but he remained stubborn about not letting the pencil go, given he was explicitly told no matter what. So he then started writing with his left hand, infuriating his teacher, but she was unable to stop him because he couldn't write with his right hand while holding the dead pencil. Grandpa said he got pretty popular at school and kept it up the entire year, driving all of the teachers insane, according to him. He did stop holding the pencil on his last day of classes for that year, but kept writing with his left hand. To this day, he laughs over the fact that the staff at his school didn't notice until he left at the end of the day and waved bye to the mean teacher with his right hand. Grandpa always tells me that he's never heard someone pitch the degree of fit she had that day. I just love my amazing, stubborn, and crafty grandpa. What hand do you write with? Your right or left? Please let us know.
Left hand all day, bruh.
All that over a couple jugs of water. Not my story, but my dad's from a couple years back. My dad was a dentist for just over 40 years in a small, tight-knit neighborhood tucked in a big city. He's no saint, but over the years, he built up a reputation as a trusted professional who genuinely cared about doing good work. If someone couldn't pay, he'd let them pay later. Most of his patients were first-generation immigrants, and he learned a good amount of their language to help communicate with them. Suffice to say, he was a pretty good dentist to have. That is, until he decided to retire. When the financial crisis hit in '08 and '09, my dad had been thinking about retiring for a while, but due to the market crash, he decided it would be better to wait it out a couple more years. Early 60s, so he had some time. Then in 2015, he decided enough was enough and he had to get out. Business was back up, but at his stage in life, it became just a constant headache running a dental practice, constantly worrying about his staff in his office. He needed out. Glossing over a whole saga of him sorting through the process of actually selling his business, around early 2016 he was able to strike a deal with a dental corporation to buy out his practice. Dental corporations seem to be the new age of dentistry, replacing individually owned practices with multiple offices, referring patients within the corporate structure. A bit sneaky, but it's business. These corporations pull a lot more shady stuff, but the offer they made my dad was a standard, we're buying everything and paying in full, then you work for us for 3 months and you're done. Easy, right? Day 1 of my dad's 3-month finale and things aren't looking great. They placed this new office manager called Sheila, who seems like she's never managed anything more than her iPhone. My dad, having managed his business for 40 plus years, starts asking if she's going to do X, Y, or Z, and all he gets in response is,
You're the dentist, I'm the manager. Don't you have teeth to look at?
hoping that his office doesn't have to fall apart while he's still there. My dad asks his hygienist/front desk staff to go through the regular orders and such, even if the manager forgets. This keeps them afloat for a while. Then, one by one, the staff are beginning to be retrained. Sheila brings in new booking software even she doesn't know how to use, and the front desk can't figure it out. Bookings are a mess, orders are getting missed, and within a couple weeks, 2 of them are let go for more competent replacements. My dad is not happy. The staff weren't perfect, but they were from the neighborhood and were also part of the reason why the patients came to his office. Soon after, they fired one of the hygienists for being late for a 3rd time, which leaves only 1. All these staff are being replaced by people personally vetted by Sheila. Of course, they aren't familiar with the patients or the office, and they are going downhill fast. All the while, Sheila's barking at him, power tripping. They haven't found a replacement dentist yet, so they plan on bringing in dentists from a nearby office to fill in the day after he leaves, so no proper transition. Without another dentist, the only person who knows all of the little quirks in the office is my dad, and the hygienist, to a degree. At this point, my dad doesn't even care about the office. There was no way his patients would have been taken care of here, so better for them to get started on finding somewhere better. It was my dad's last day that Sheila finally slipped. There were no patients booked for that afternoon, so my dad was planning on leaving the office early and getting a head start on his retirement. Sheila had other plans. She asked my dad, as one of her employees, to pick up some water for the operatory equipment, among other supplies that my dad usually had his assistants pick up. In my dad's head, this was very disrespectful to his long career as a dentist, and in that moment, something in his head clicked. He asked Sheila, "Just to clarify, you want me to get water, right?" Sheila was a bit confused, thinking he was being stupid, and replied,
Yes, water. In a bottle? You've been doing this for how long and you've never bought water?
To which my dad replied, "Well, I'm just the dentist, and you're the office manager." Not wanting to risk breaching his contract for the sale of his office, my dad slipped my hygienist the order list, had her buy a bunch of jugs of water with other supplies, which she drove back to the office for him to bring inside, and started his beautiful journey of retirement. Little did Sheila know, operatory equipment is pretty delicate stuff, and for 40 years, my dad had clearly instructed his staff to buy distilled water, as regular old water has a hefty amount of minerals which seriously damage dental equipment. According to the hygienist, the entire office went to a screeching halt since all of the equipment was malfunctioning, and it took a week for Sheila and the new dentist to even figure out what was wrong. They had electricians come in before, calling a service guy for the equipment, which makes no sense. They were already bleeding patients since none of them trusted the new management, and a week of cancellations was essentially the end of their business when it came to the regulars. The hygienist quit after a couple of weeks from the way she was being treated, but it took a surprising 9 months for the office to close for good. I double-checked Sheila's LinkedIn profile, and she got promoted to dental assistant at another one of the corporation's offices. As for my dad, he was pretty bummed to see the whole thing crash and burn, but he was happy to help Sheila land a new job. Why are you resting? Get me a fork. I work at a busy Japanese restaurant, and my coworkers had an encounter with a table full of entitled Karens consisting of an older woman and a bunch of middle-aged to younger women. At this particular time, it was relatively lively. I was busy handling orders in the kitchen while the hall staff were running around like headless chickens trying to take everyone's order. One of my coworkers starts to take Karen's table's order. When they list off 20 or so items, he says, "All right, give me a second while I input all of this." Older Karen did not like this at all.
No, do it now.
Soon after receiving their order, they complained that the lotus chips older Karen received were overcooked. Our lotus chips typically are fried to all heck to remove the sweetness and moisture. We then keep them wrapped and in containers out in the front for easy service. They taste pretty good and are by no means overcooked. But whatever, I guess they gave them another batch of chips that were cooked the exact same way and they didn't complain about it again. Once some empty dishes have piled onto their table, coworker comes with a tray to collect it. As he pulls up to the table, he's holding the tray in one hand with a lax wrist and is by no means ready to carry anything. Before he can properly support it so that he can grab things, two younger Karens dump their beer glasses on the tray. The tray is at an angle and isn't supported, so my coworker quickly scrambled to make sure they didn't fall. Things started to slow down, so one of my managers took her break. She was relaxing on her phone when older Karen storms over.
Why are you resting? Get me a fork.
I remember watching this happening. I didn't hear anything, and I just figured everyone else was busy, so she asked her for help. Turns out I bore witness to Karen entitlement. Since my coworkers are mostly Japanese, where customer is always king, and despite living in a society where you can tell these people to buzz off, we had to leave them be and remain polite. There is a limit on their dining time, so the second it's up, they told them to leave. They get up to pay and then sit back down. They're asked to leave 3 more times to make way for more customers. They don't leave at all. Then, when it suits them, they finally leave. When a customer leaves, we bong on a small drum and say thank you. Needless to say, they didn't get this treatment. This kind of entitlement was just so pointless. Entitled mom tries to call the police on a homeless man just because he gets free donuts and her entitled kid doesn't. So I own a few franchises, and one of my franchises includes a Dunkin' Donuts franchise here in Los Angeles. So when I started my Dunkin' Donuts franchise, we'd often get a frequent customer named Bill. Bill's a nice guy and he's around 62. I found out he's homeless and he's going through financial hardship. I can relate a bit because, I was born and brought up in poverty. There would be days as a kid where my family didn't know whether we could have a meal tomorrow. It was sad times, but I'm glad my dad gave me the best education he did, and because of that education, I'm financially well off. I don't have to worry about money for me, my kids, or my dad. Back to Bill. Now, since Bill is a nice guy, he never causes any trouble, and he's so positive and kind and loving. So then I told Bill to come at closing time around 9 p.m. At closing time, we don't have any customers and we are half open. We don't make any fresh donuts and we turn off most of the lights, etc. So it doesn't look opened, but for Bill, it's open. So every day at 9 p.m., Bill comes in. We've been doing this for a few years. I hand him a couple of water bottles and all of the leftover donuts, a cup of coffee, leftover snacks, to make sure he isn't hungry. He always loves the food, and when I hand him the food, he becomes so happy, and it makes me happy that I'm able to help him. Yesterday, we're doing the same thing, closing the store down, etc. Bill comes in at 9 p.m., and I hand him the food. Then an entitled mom with entitled kid walked into the store. It's closing time. My employee asks her what she'd like. Then entitled mom looks to the left and sees that I'm handing the donuts and food to Bill. And then I greet Bill goodbye and give him a hug and tell him goodnight. Entitled mom quickly stops Bill at the door and then says,
Wait, hold up. You didn't pay for this? You stole this? I'm going to call the cops on you.
I tell Bill, it's okay, man. It's fine. You can go. Take care. I'll deal with this. Entitled mom starts yelling at me and telling me that she's going to call the cops on me because I gave free donuts to Bill. She then proceeds to tell me that I'm not allowed to give free food to homeless people. It's true that I'm not allowed to, but it's Bill. He's cool, and it's just free food to help him out, and it's my store anyways. Entitled kid keeps yelling,
Mommy, I want donuts. I want donuts.
on and on. Entitled mom then demands that I also give her entitled kid free donuts too, because I gave free food to Bill. At that point, I just lost it and told her to get out of the store before I call the cops on you for trying to harass Bill and me. Then she leaves, finally. You know, this is like the first time I've seen a person who would have a problem with a homeless man getting free food. Like, there have been other customers who have seen me hand food to Bill before and they don't say a word. But first time I've had an entitled mom get mad at me for giving free food and then demanding that I give her entitled kid free food. Rudest customer I've ever had. My restaurant opened up about a week ago, and it's been pretty slow, especially in the mornings. After having only one two-top at the bar an hour after opening, I was relieved when another lady finally walks up. We have signs that say table closed to prevent people from walking up to the bar. All guests are supposed to be seated by a host. This lady somehow bypassed the hosts, sees all the closed signs, and snaps at me. Where do I sit? I was caught off guard for a second because of her attitude, because I haven't had anyone bypass the hosts to come to the bar yet. Usually, nobody can get in without speaking to a host first. However, we were so slow and I didn't care. I just told her she could just sit at the open spot and moved the closed sign for her. I ask her how she's doing, and she just sighs and looks at me, not replying for a couple seconds until she finally says flatly, "Good, how are you?" She asks for an iced tea to drink, and I bring it to her. Now, the restaurant I work at has taken away all of the salt, pepper, and sugar caddies off of the tables in the bar. We have salt, pepper, and sweetener packets that we have, by request only, that we're supposed to give out. Normally what happens is I drop off a tea, they say, "Can I get some sweetener?" and I get it for them, no problem. This lady, however, without saying a word, gets up and walks away. I assume she's going to the bathroom. She comes back, glaring at me, and literally slams down a bag of sweetener on the table that she must have got from her car. I tell her, "I had sweetener back here for you." She snaps, "Oh, did you?" Very sarcastic and rudely. I was literally 6 feet away from her the entire time. All she had to do was ask me. She squeezed her lemon in the tea and literally throws it on the bar top. She orders her food with me, which default comes with a certain type beans. We have other types of beans, and I usually ask if the default beans is what they want, but she seemed so irritated at it and was being so rude and short, I decided not to ask her. If she wanted a different bean, it would take me 30 seconds to change it out. My manager was walking by and heard the way she was talking to me and asks her if everything is okay. She is visibly upset, yet keeps telling him she's fine. The other bartender asks what he can do for her to make her experience better. She literally ignores him. My manager brings out her food and she goes, "Should I have been asked what type of bean I wanted?" He says, "Did you want a different bean? I can get that for you." "That's not what I asked. Should she have asked me what kind of bean I wanted?" "Those are the default beans, but yes, I suppose she should have asked. I can get you other beans if that's what you want. It will take less than a minute." "That's not what I want. I just wanted options." Her tone is very belligerent and hostile throughout the whole exchange. Since there's nothing he can do for her, he walks away. She snaps at me to bring salt, so I do. Then she snaps at me to bring pepper, so I do. Then my general manager walks by and asks her what's wrong. That's how visibly angry this woman is. At first, she snaps, "Nothing's wrong," but then proceeds to tell him just how awful I am, how I'm the worst server ever. She asks him if I have ever gone through training because I clearly have no idea what I'm doing. Then she turns to me and in the most condescending tone, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, says, "Can I get the bill and a to-go box?" She had just barely got her food, so excuse me for not reading your mind knowing you were done. I leave to get the to-go box, and my general manager asked me what was going on. I take maybe 2 minutes to brief him on the situation, and apparently the whole time I was gone, she was saying, "Why is she taking so long? Where is she?" I bring her the box, and she's boxing up her food, literally slamming her plates and stuff all over. This lady is crazy, so I didn't want to bring the bus tab over to her and start taking plates away. because she was still boxing her food and I didn't want her to get mad at me for taking something too early. My plan was to wait until she was done to take her plates away. However, she looks at me and snaps.
Are you gonna come take some of these plates away?
The entire time I'm taking her plates away, she's berating me.
Is this your first day? Do you even know what you're doing? I used to be a server, and I would make $100 a shift because I knew what I was doing. I asked people what kind of beans they wanted with their meal.
I just kept going, yeah, good for you. That's great that you're so good at serving. She hasn't put the card in the check presenter, but I see my other guest has. I'm literally in the middle of paying out my other guest when she goes, hello, like I'm supposed to stop helping the other guest and help her instead. I just ignore her, thank my other guest, and then pay her out. I tell her it was a pleasure serving her, my voice dripping with sarcasm, and she leaves, leaving me with a big fat 0 on her tab. My Karen sister cuts me off since I can't help her financially. My family has never had a good time when I was growing up. We always struggled financially, which came to a head when both of my parents passed in the past few years. I'm a freshman in college, 19, male, and my sister is 25. She's always depended on my parents for financial support, but when they passed, my father 7 months ago and my mother around 5 years ago, that dependence fell onto me. She has problems that make it very difficult for her to work, but she is able to if that place has a good environment, nice and caring people. Her boyfriend of 5 years, however, is around 35. He can get angry at times, but he can also be a nice person. The thing about him is that he isn't able to keep a job for more than 2 weeks, either because he quits from someone disrespecting him once, or because he is laid off or fired and hasn't had a real job for around 5 to 6 months. This essentially led to me being the only person who could pay the bills for the house, even though I was working an $8 an hour job, working 13 hours a week, college work-study. I've been trying to find other jobs to work, like being an audio transcriptionist, but I don't have the time to do a lot of it because I have to juggle working towards a driver's license so I can get another job and working on an incomplete class that I had to take from the stress of everything. There were other people who offered to help her, which she took, but it soon got to the point where they stopped helping her. So she got mad and began to blame them and talking mess about them for not helping her, one of them being a former employee of mine and good friend to me and my father. He had told her and her boyfriend that he would help them if her boyfriend would go and work for him again. He had quit because he and another coworker had an argument, but he always refused and kept expecting my former employee to help them. I was talking to some of my friends, former teachers, and my current employer/supervisor about the situation, and they all had said that she should be able to take care of herself and that it isn't my responsibility to take care of her when I have my life and career to get ready for. But there's always this nagging voice in my head to help her out as much as I can, even if my bank goes negative, as it has happened once or twice already. This morning, it all led up to her calling me and asking me to send her some money for cigarettes and food. She has food stamps, but I don't know if she's used them all or not. I told her that I wasn't able to since I don't have any money to give. Also because I'm currently living in the negatives with my bank, and that I had a large load of stuff that was really stressing me out. She got angry about it and hung up. She then called me again and told me that she was never going to contact me again. Am I the jerk for letting it come to this? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his sister and her boyfriend? Please let us know.
She's actually doing you a favor if she never contacts you again. Your life's gonna be a lot better without her and that boyfriend of hers in it.
Escalating feud leads to dad orchestrating his brother's arrest. My uncle has always been a self-righteous, petty slimeball with a foul temper and grandiose idea of his own importance, but little to no brains. My dad always just took it and tried to keep the peace because family is so important to him. This is the story of how my uncle finally pushed my dad too far and ended up getting arrested for his trouble. It's pretty long since it covers several months of a feud between them. As background, my dad and my uncle are neighbors in a rural community of 600-ish people. My dad built the house my uncle lives in and sold it along with a small plot, so my dad's remaining land is about 6 acres and runs along the side and the back of my uncle's smaller property. My uncle is a dealer for HVAC units. My dad is in the HVAC business and would buy some things from his brother even though his brother's prices were higher and he had a more limited inventory than other dealers, in order to help his brother out. My dad also rented a building his brother owned and used it as his shop/office. He only rented the building and parking lot, but in the field out behind the shop, my uncle and my dad both would collect old HVAC units. These things are rusty and all around ugly, but when they didn't have anything else to do, they could go get one of these old units to break down for scrap. The story starts when one day my dad went to his brother and said he needed a certain unit, but his brother quoted him a really high price, and he also couldn't deliver it in the time frame my dad needed. So my dad called up another dealer he works with, and that guy had a unit on hand to give him for a much lower price, a no-brainer. My uncle found out about this somehow. Dudes in the HVAC business are apparently like gossipy teenagers, and confronted my dad, basically giving him an ultimatum that if my dad wouldn't commit to buying 100% of his units from my uncle, then my uncle wouldn't sell him anything. I already told you, my uncle is an idiot. So my dad didn't say anything to his brother, but he took him at his word and stopped buying anything from him. A month or so later, my uncle showed up at my dad's shop and confronted him again, wanting to know why my dad hadn't ordered anything from him that month. When my dad told him why, my uncle exploded. They apparently had a screaming match, and in the end, my uncle announced that my dad was no longer his brother. They were no longer doing business together, and my dad was evicted from the shop. I will note that legally my dad was not evicted because evicting him would have required a legal note, a certain period of time, etc. But my dad was over it, so he said fine and began converting the barn at his house into his new shop. So my uncle, who apparently had thought my dad would not call his bluff, showed back up at the shop a few days later and informed my dad that he also has to move all of his old HVAC units scattered around in the field behind the property, or he would sue my dad for the cost of removal. Now, this too probably had no legal power since my dad's lease was only on the building, not the field, and my uncle contributed to and used the old units as communal property. But when my dad is upset, he's really upset. So he agreed to move the old units. He took his tractor over and loaded each one onto his flatbed trailer, drove out behind his barn, and painstakingly arranged hundreds of rust buckets, ugly old HVAC units an inch or two off the property line at the back of my uncle's house. Note that my dad could not see these things from his house due to the way his property is set up, but my uncle had an HD view of them in his backyard. My uncle started being even more of a creep than usual and was always spying on my dad's house, so my dad decided to build a privacy fence down the side of his property that runs along my uncle's property, but not the back of the property where the HVAC units are. The fence guys arrived and worked for a few hours before my uncle came screeching into his driveway and exploded out of his truck, already screaming because these poor fence guys had laid posts or tools or whatever temporarily on his side of the property line as they were building the fence. My uncle called the police, who basically told the fence guys, "Okay dudes, just don't put anything on this crazy man's property," and left. The next day, apparently, someone left a hammer across the property line, so here comes my uncle screaming at them again. He called the police again, but by the time they got there, the guy had already moved his hammer, so the police were just annoyed by this point, but could only warn them not to do it again. Later that afternoon, my uncle called the police a third time, I kid you not. This time, he wanted to report that my dad had stolen a backhoe from him, like one that attaches to the back of a tractor. One that, again, I kid you not, my uncle had given to my dad 2 whole years prior because my uncle didn't even have a tractor big enough to attach the thing to. The cop was not amused when this story came to light, and since it was the same cop who had been there earlier that day, she was beyond annoyed at that point. My dad helpfully said, "Come get the backhoe if you want it," knowing full well my uncle had no way to pick the thing up or haul it even the few feet to his own yard. My uncle replied that my dad was just trying to trap him and would say he was trespassing if my uncle came onto his land, even though the cop was standing right there when my dad offered. And by the way, this conversation was taking place in my dad's driveway. He then said that he wanted to file a complaint with the police that basically amounts to a restraining order against my dad. It isn't a restraining order because it isn't issued by the judge, but the cops treat it that way. It's for habitual trespassers. Annoyed cop helpfully informed my dad that this would mean that even if my uncle texted or emailed him and invited him to come over to his house to discuss things, even if my dad had written proof that he had been invited, if my uncle called the cops or even took a picture of my dad on his property, he could potentially get arrested for trespassing. My dad said he wanted to file one against his brother too. the pro-revenge part of this story is now upon us. My dad knew full well that his brother had no real clue where the property lines were and was not going to dig up the survey to check. He only knew where the lines were because my dad knows exactly where they are and maintains wooden stubs in the ground periodically along his property lines. So when his brother was away for a few days, my dad moved all of the old HVAC units along the property line over further onto his own property by a few feet and moved the stubs back the same distance. So basically, it looked the same as it had before, except it looked like the property line was a few feet further back than it actually is. He then placed some random pieces of scrap across the fake property line, still on his own property, but it looked like it was across the property line if all you had to go by were the incorrectly placed stubs, set up a few game cameras aimed at the line, and waited. Sure enough, his jerk brother came storming out of his house as soon as he noticed this scrap on his side of the property line, crossed the real property line to get a good look at the scrap, and called the police. My dad was waiting for them with his survey showing where the actual property line is, a copy of the report an annoyed cop had given him, and game camera footage of his brother clearly trespassing on his land, and it was my uncle who got arrested. The only way his revenge for all the trouble and heartache his brother caused could possibly have been any sweeter would have been if it were an annoyed cop who showed up at the scene and arrested my uncle. But alas, he had to make do with someone he and his brother had both gone to high school with, which worked out well since it was especially embarrassing for my uncle to be arrested by someone he knew well, and who could make sure everyone else in town knew. Edit to add, nothing really came of my uncle's arrest, or at least not that my dad has heard about, and he had heard about it since this is a town of like 600-ish people. But it was probably enough for my uncle just to have to get pulled into handcuff, spend a night in jail, and have people know about it, because my uncle hasn't caused any more trouble for my dad other than generally existing where my dad occasionally has to see his truck drive by. My uncle is also now in a business dispute with his wife's sister and his brother-in-law, so presumably he's trying to take his anger out on another target, and also who isn't his older and much larger brother who has been perfectly willing to beat him up all their lives whenever it's devolved into physical disputes. My uncle, aunt, cousin, and my cousin's wife all unfriended me on social media, so I only know what's going on with them via small-town gossip nowadays. My sister was driving down the road recently, saw my uncle in his yard and waved at him. He turned away like he didn't know her. None of us got an announcement when my cousin's wife had her baby recently, so I think the end of the story is just that we are all dead to my uncle and his family, but he is too afraid to do anything besides pretend we all don't exist. Have you ever had a dispute with a relative? If so, what was it about? Please let us know.
Oh, my cousin Sharon is the worst.
Is it okay if I fire you? Time frame is early 2000s for reference. In my late high school / early college years, I had a job doing telemarketing work during winter and summer breaks. While it was boiler room cold calling, we primarily were soliciting donations for agencies that had contracted us to do the work, so felt less scuzzy. Think police departments, fire departments, etc. We kept a portion of donations for operating expenses. Everything over a certain threshold went directly to the receiving party. Everybody wins. I enjoyed the job as the scripts were simple. I was allowed to read a book and such between calls, and a number of my friends were also employed there, so we could hang out during lunch breaks. The pay was a decent chunk above minimum wage at the time, so it was a good gig. I also had a knack for it, and at one point was fifth in sales across all their sites they had in operation, second in our building. One summer while driving to work, my car promptly dies with no warning, and I'm left stranded on the road. As you do in this situation, back before cell phones for poor college students were a thing, I walk to the nearest house and ask to use the phone. I call my dad, who starts driving to get me, and call my work to let them know I'll be late. My boss says fine and that he will chat with me when I get in. Father shows up with my mother in 2 cars. I take the extra and he begins the arduous process of towing my car back to their house. This involved tying a rope to the front of the car and to the back of his vehicle and crawling back home so he could fix it himself. I've been in that back car and did not envy my father being in the back car with only 10 feet of space between him and the car my mother was driving, but I'm off to work. I arrive to work, clock in almost an hour after the start of my shift, and am promptly told by the front receptionist that my boss would like to see me in his office, so I head on back. Beginning details completed. Cue the start of the malicious compliance story. My boss and I have always had a good rapport. I'm a good worker, gave good reviews, and he and I have some similar interests outside of work we can chat about occasionally. When I arrive in his office, he's shuffling some papers around and has laid out a few documents facing me. As close as I can recall, this is the conversation that followed. Boss: hope everything worked out with the car. Glad to have you here. Couple things I need to discuss with you. First of all, as I'm sure you are aware, being more than 30 minutes late to work is considered a Class C violation. 3 classes from C to A, C being the least egregious. If insufficient time is given prior to the occurrence, this is your first violation, so I'd like to talk to you about what happens next. I'm sweating at this point. I've never ever been talked to about being out of order on anything while working here, and getting my first violation scared the heck out of me. So I'm sitting there, white-faced, and he continues. Boss: no official write-up or anything occurs for a first violation, or even the first few Class C violations, but it is manager's discretion on the punishment depending on past behaviors. Now, you are a good employee, and I've put into corporate a few times to give you a raise, but because you only work during your school breaks, it is denied as you aren't considered full-time. So the papers I have here are your termination papers and an offer letter I'd like to extend to you to hire you back on again. So, in short, before I file these, I'd like to ask, is it okay if I fire you? So we go through the process of him firing me, which then allowed him to extend an offer to me to rehire me at roughly a 25% increase in pay, since he could justify to corporate the bump as he was hiring someone with experience. In talking with him, he let me know it was something he occasionally did to the high school and college workers to get around the corporate's policy of not allowing raises to people that didn't work 1,000 plus hours in a year. It was his own way of being maliciously compliant with a policy that didn't allow him to reward some people that he thought deserved it. He had been apparently waiting for me to do something that he could technically fire me for. The way their back-end systems worked, it wouldn't even show up as a break-in service, since the firing and hiring happened on the same day, and since I never worked more than the minimum 1,000 hours each year, I didn't have any tenure or anything to be worried about losing. The laugh he and the receptionist had when he walked me back to the front to introduce her to the new employee was enjoyable, and I've had a fun story to tell ever since. Entitled Mom made our wedding about herself and ruined everything. My fiance and I got engaged 2 years ago. For context, we are both master's graduates working the business world and are more than competent to plan complex events such as weddings. We don't need a wedding planner for this reason, and I already had a list of venues, venue, etc. that worked with our date and budget. Cue in the mother-in-law, and she immediately wants to be involved with the planning. Okay, fine. She's been very nice to me and treats me like one of her own, which actually is part of the problem, and never had the wedding she wanted because her own mom was controlling. So I lost/gave up on some of the battles and allowed her to change the date from something important to us to a random one so her sister can come. Her sister wouldn't come on our original meaningful date because her son, my fiance's cousin, has a 51st birthday on that day. I would have been more than happy to celebrate his birthday at our wedding, but it was a no-go. So fine, we changed the date and I spend my time re-coordinating with all of our vendors. Then she starts making more demands. I must add his sister to my bridal party because it's tradition. We're friendly but not close. She doesn't usually show up at events she says yes to, and my other bridesmaids are my best friends I've known closely for well over a decade, so it was very uncomfortable. She didn't make it a question, and I was too shocked to respond at the time, like I was literally speechless. Then she complains about my dress, telling me I should get the first one I showed her, even though it was only one size and 00 and cannot be altered to my body. Plus, I liked the second one better. She hated that our reception was a 10-minute drive away. Her friends wanted it at the same location as the ceremony, even though we planned for prepaid parking and taxis. She changed our original menu to something I didn't care for. I am to blame here since I didn't want to be a complainer. I fought for every one of my decisions and was so tired, so let her do it since she offered to pay. Because of lockdown, she gave us an ultimatum to move our ceremony and reception to next year or still do the full reception this year. We can't due to restrictions, but she didn't care. If it was an enjoyable wedding planning process where I got a say for my own wedding, I would have moved it for a better experience after lockdown. But I dreaded it so much, I literally broke down when my fiance asked to push it out, since I couldn't imagine going another year of being treated like a baby with no capabilities or thoughts of my own. My fiance did finally back me up and told his family we're already married, but I can't move the date out either, since it's another lie I don't want to take part in. We have to lie about a lot of big decisions to his family. I get her other adult kids, mid to late 30s, are heavily dependent on her financially and emotionally, but my parents raised me to be independent at a young age and trust that they raised me well to make good decisions, so I'm just overwhelmed. Ruined wedding, but I'm planning our honeymoon, so that's the only thing I'm excited for since it will be for us. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you let mother-in-law plan the wedding or not? Please let us know.
I'd drop you like a hot potato if you let your mom ruin our wedding, Reddit boy.
Am I the jerk for not calling my husband my honored husband in front of his parents? I'm a 28-year-old woman and have been married to my husband, a 32-year-old man, since 2018. My husband is ethnically Japanese and a second-generation American. His parents are from Osaka. He sort of half speaks Japanese, mostly sentences he has memorized, greetings, and his parents speak great English. On the other hand, I lived in Japan for 3 years, so I am conversationally pretty good. I've studied hard to get to the level I'm at, and I have passed level 2 of the Japanese language proficiency test. Not great, but not bad. Lately, my husband is super into me calling him Goshujin-sama, which can be translated to my honored husband. It's extremely unusual to call your own husband this, as it is usually reserved for other people's husbands as a respectful term, but it's kind of an anime/Japanese geek culture thing. I was okay with it in private because it makes him happy. Last week, went to his parents' house for dinner, and on the way over, he asked if I could call him Goshujin-sama all evening. I immediately shot his idea down with a firm no, because that would be super embarrassing. His parents are native Japanese speakers in their 60s. I'm not going to subject them to what you'd pay a waitress in a maid cafe $20 for a cup of coffee to call you. To be honest, I don't think my husband really gets how the phrase is properly used, despite his insistence. He kept trying to convince me, reminding me that he's Japanese and knows what is proper, despite the fact that I speak better Japanese than him, and I was having none of it. I just shut down and tuned him out. We got there, and sometime into the night, I called his name to ask if he wanted a drink. Despite him being in hearing range, he ignored me. I said it again, and this time he looked at me, gave me this pleading shrug, and then turned back to the TV. I didn't get him a drink and just got myself one. A while later, I said his name again, and he audibly sighed. He told me that he wanted me to call him what I call him at home, to which I responded I would most certainly not be calling him what I call him at home. This was all in front of his parents, by the way. On the car drive home, I told him that I wasn't going to call him Goshujin-sama anymore because he can't draw the line between the fun, playful couple stuff and his parents. He has sulked for the past week, and I don't even know what to do. Normally, I would not even consider the possibility that I was wrong here, but he's normally a very rational, reasonable, and respectful person. I feel like I'm being gaslighted and don't know what to do. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you call your significant other Goshujin-sama or not? Please let us know.
I'll tell you what I'd do is I'd leave you a comment telling you how cringe it is when you mispronounce it. I watch a lot of anime and stuff, so I know these things and I'm cool.
You need to change this right now. I'd be happy to. I teach in Arizona, home of one of the most underrated education systems in America, in my humble opinion. I think we really do great work here. It's the end of the marking period, and my school has a US standard A, B, C, D, or F grading system. I teach an algebra class to 8th graders, a year ahead in our parts, who are either smart enough or their parents want them to be smart enough. Parents are allowed to opt in. It's the law. As we come to the end of the year and I'm posting grades, I'm reminded of this time last year when I got to serve up some compliance that was as delicious as it was malicious. I had a parent of one student actually come up to me in person while I was on after-school duty to discuss an issue he had with grading. For all the teachers out there, I'm feeling the wave of FERPA violation coming over you. Yes, this is true, and I told him I can't discuss grades in a public setting. I didn't get to the word setting entirely before he interrupts and says,
BS, we're at school. This is my kid. I'm the one giving permission here, so let me ask you.
I'm thinking to myself, been doing that a lot lately. Great, I guess we're doing this while I'm directing traffic. I then realized the issue of safety, so I'm like, sir, I need to direct traffic, and then he continues talking utter nonsense. I could only imagine. I wasn't really listening at this point, while I'm looking down the road for more cars to wave down for pickup. He's just going and going. I hear a word or two like,
"You said," and "He's already turned in that."
and finally, as I get to a lull and look at him, he says to me,
"And there's no way that you can fail my kid and put the comment, 'pleasure to have in class.' You need to change this right now."
enter the light bulb of malicious compliance. That's my third light bulb reference today, by the way. The lull was about to pick back up when I say, you make a good point. I don't know what I was thinking. I'll change it the second I'm done here. Which is actually possible because I always have an iPad on me pretty much at all times. My wife gets jealous. The Karen of a dad walked off back to his parked car with his kid visible and looking at me from the passenger side, and I swear he actually said,
"That's what I thought."
which, if you're unfamiliar, is the thing said to you when you've lost an argument that could have been a fight because you chickened out. Not responding to this is conceding defeat, usually. As the dad finishes his little strut to his car, I give the kid a thumbs up, and the kid slowly gives me a sheepish thumbs back. Hilarious. The kid seems to somehow know what the dad doesn't. The second I get to a secure, private location, I go into the grades book and change the comment from "pleasure to have in class" to "respectful to teachers and staff," which is more than I can say for this kid's dad. Needless to say, he still got an F. Deserved. And yes, I made this change on the toilet. Guest upset that windows do not open. This woman was a doozy before she even checked in. About a month ago, she called looking for an extended stay rate because she was moving. I told her for that rate, she needs to talk to sales. She would not shut up. "I'm not sure why I would have to talk to sales for that special rate when I was able to book at another hotel with it." We're not the same hotel. I sent her to sales, and a minute later she calls back. "No one answered." "Did you leave her a voicemail?" "No." Bruh, if you leave her a message, she will call back as soon as she can. Cue her going into her allergies and hypersensitivities and how everything in the room has to be hypoallergenic and fragrance-free. That's all fine and dandy, but I'm not the one to talk to about that. Okay, ma'am, if you want that extended stay rate and to discuss hypoallergenic accommodation, you will have to talk to a manager. I have no information available to me about what products housekeeping uses, unfortunately. Cue her going into a rant again. I take her info and hand the sales manager a note. The sales manager says she's already on her list of people to call back. Last night, this woman checked in. Thank God it was someone else and not me. I warned my coworker about her and how needy she is. She joked that this lady would come back several times. This was a self-fulfilling prophecy. She comes to me at the desk. "Lady, I don't understand. I was under the impression that the window's open. It looks like they can't." Me, "No, they do not." Lady, "But I thought they did. That's why I asked for a ground floor room by the fields, facing away from the road." Me, "I'm sorry. We do not have windows that open, unfortunately." She was extremely distraught. I thought is not the same thing as knowing. She walks away and comes back. I was under the impression that they opened and I could have fresh air." Me, "Oh, did you ask us if they did? Did someone tell you they do?" "No." "Then what the heck is your problem? That's on you." "I thought someone would have taken the courtesy to tell me they don't." I have no idea what to say except sorry, and hotels usually don't have windows that open unless you have a patio. What kind of hotels have windows that open? Not many, at least in the States. That would be such a liability issue. Sorry we did not read your mind. Am I the jerk for yelling at a lady who untied my dog while I was grocery shopping? I take my high-energy border collie for daily walks. A few days ago, I was discussing with my husband how strange I think it is when people come up and ask to pet my dog when we are out and about. Always older, overly friendly women. Sometimes these walks involve errands where I tie my dog's leash to a bike rack out front. This morning, we walked to the grocery store to pick up a few things, and I left my dog tied securely at his usual spot. As I'm heading inside, an older woman says to me, "What's your dog's name?" I thought to myself, oh no, I don't want to engage with her. So I just gave her a short glance and told her, and I raced into the store. I spend 5 minutes inside the store, then come back out and see this woman holding my dog. She had apparently untied him and moved him to a new spot. As I walk out, I gave her the death stare and said, "What are you doing?" She explained that she thought the spot I left him in was too wet, so she wanted to move him to the other side of the building. Then she couldn't hook the leash up, so she just decided to wait with him until I returned. I lost it on her outside of the store and told her to never touch my dog again, or he may bite her, and she should never move other people's dogs without them knowing. Now I feel somewhat guilty for yelling at her when she was probably just clueless and trying to help. Am I the jerk for yelling and leaving my dog unattended when I know this behavior exists where I live? Or is she to blame for moving and touching my dog without my permission? Edit. She was trying to move my dog to the designated dog leash hookup spot with water bowls. Unfortunately, my leash does not hook up to it. It is very common where I live to leave your dog outside while you run into a shop. Edit 2. Thank you everyone for your feedback and schooling me on dog theft. Truly never crossed my mind it could be an issue in this town. I've now decided that my pooch will be staying at home for my walks that involve errands. Edit 3. I just came back from the same store, Sans Dog, and the same lady was there. Looks like she works there out front, sanitizing and returning carts, so any speculation that she was in the process of stealing my dog can be debunked. Edit 4. The conversation with my husband and us thinking it's strange for people to ask to pet our dog was in the context of everything going on right now in social distancing. Under normal circumstances, this obviously would be fine, but older, aka more at risk, women wanting to rub their hands all over something that they don't know where it's been seems strange. Plus, coming close enough to pet the dog is breaking social distancing guidelines.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.